What if I told you that these budget Joyo pedals could sound like booty beasts after a few mods? I've modded hundreds of pedals at this point, all over the world, most of which have been done at sea during my time as a Royal Navy Chief Engineer. Today I'm revisiting 7 of my most popular Joyo mod videos, and I've put them all in one ultimate package. Some actually sound better than the pedals that they were trying to copy. This one came from wanting big blues tones on a budget. The Joyo Vintage Overdrive already sounds sweet. It's a fantastic pedal. It's basically a TS-808, but with a few tweaks it can sound every bit as good as those boutique TS-808s that you can pay hundreds of pounds for. My longest standing customer, Gordon, if you're watching this, hello mate, he actually bought his first pedal off me, I think in like 2008. Anyway, he sent me one of these vintage overdrives to modify. We're going to do some basic mods just to fatten up the tone a bit and give him some clipping options. Now, I haven't actually discussed this with him, but this is how they come, they look. And without asking him if he wanted me to refinish the pedal, I have refinished it by mistake. Sorry about that, mate. Right, so this is how they come stock. That's the look. And this is actually the version that I've modified for him. I haven't done the top lacquer yet, but it's finished in safe green. And as standard, it's got some sort of a pin-up on it for Hello Sailor effects. And because I was modifying one for him, I bought a separate one to sell on my Reverb channel. This one here. Also finished in safe green nitrocellulose, still needs a top coat on it. Anyway, so we move them out the way. And if this is something you'd be interested in, and you'd like to see more of these type of videos, like, subscribe, and watch the video. Cheers. Right, so this is the Joyo TS-808 clone. This is a real early one that he sent in. You can tell by the strip wire, it hasn't got any glue on. It's a pain in the, to be honest. So as you can see here, these connections sometimes break. They haven't actually threaded through them, through the PCB. They've just soldered them on top of, so that's a bit of a nightmare. So if you're taking one of these apart yourself, please be wary of that and mindful. Now, the areas we're going to look at today are going to be right here. These two here, these are the clipping diodes. These are a set of just standard 41848 diodes, basic silicon diodes set symmetrically. Now, we will do a drawing explaining clipping. It's going to be like Joe age 5, but we'll have a go at that. Then we are going to alter this cap here. This cap here basically sets how fat the pedal sounds. I won't get into the circuit, but if you're going to modify one of these yourself, this is the cap here, right in between that little tantalum cap and this big film cap here, this medium size one. That is the one you want to be changing. I think it's currently a 47 NF. We're going to bump that up to around about a 220 NF, something like that. We'll see how that sounds, and if we have to adjust it from there, we can. Also, what I found in these pedals, unknown reasons to myself, this cap here and this cap here, these electrolytics, which are C5 and C6, they are in fact 220 NF caps as well. And for some reason, Joyo have decided to use electrolytic caps for them, which are polarized. Anyway, I don't think they sound very good in these positions, not for signal carrying caps. So I am going to change them out. And because he's been a long-standing customer, as I say before, I'm going to change them out for a set of Sprague or Sprague, however you want to say it, caps. These are a vintage set. They're rather large. I'm just going to mount them to the back of the board if I can squeeze them in there. First things first, we're going to start with the clipping diodes. So that's these two small little diodes here. And we're going to change them out. We're going to give some options, 3 options actually. One of them is going to be no clipping diodes. And then we're going to have symmetrical and asymmetrical clipping also. I'll get into that in a second. So first things first, how do clipping diodes work? Now this is where the Joe age 5 part comes in. You'll have to excuse my drawing. Art attack, I am not. Those UK people watching this, I'm definitely not an artist. Music and or drawing, that is, I suppose. Right, so if we imagine, here's our sound space, our atmosphere, and we're going to play that amazing lead solo that requires a deluxe reverb being pushed by one of these 808 circuits. Play the guitar and our signal comes out. And this is what our signal looks like. And that's a sine wave. That is basically AC voltage here, and that's our guitar signal. Now we turn on this lovely pedal and it boosts the signal. So instead of it being a small AC signal, our sound gets louder. That's how it works. So there's our big signal. So now there's our big loud tone, but it's still clean. So what our clipping diodes do is they add a ceiling and a floor. So they give it, if you like, a stopper either side and clip it. So instead of having this lovely clean sine wave, this lovely clean signal, what the clipping diodes are going to do is they're going to clip the signal and give us some distortion or overdrive, however you want to look at. So now, instead of having this beautiful round signal that we had before, we've now got some distortion in it. Oh God, that's a terrible drawing. Anyway, so there's our clean and there's our distortion. Right. Now, this is where we get into the good stuff. So how are we going to do it? Well, I like to use some of these 1588D Japanese diodes, used way back when, reasonably hard to come by. I mean, I really like the MA150 diodes that come in a very first TS808, but they are impossibly hard to come by, and I've used the last of them. So unfortunately, we're going to go with these ones today. They still sound great. And these are what we're going to use symmetrically. And then for asymmetrical, I'm going to use these Russian germanium diodes. If I'm going to talk symmetrical clipping, we're going to do it like this. We're going to clip both sides of our signal. So the top will be clipped and the bottom will be clipped. And that means that our diodes are going to be positioned like this. One diode will be clipping one side and the other diode will be the opposite way round, clipping the other side. Now I'm sure if anyone's looked inside the pedal, you've seen diodes connected like that, opposite way round from each other. One's pointing that way and one's pointing that way. And they are basically just taking the edge off each part of this signal, depending on how much this diode clips at. So for example, each diode will have what's called a forward voltage. And I kind of let you know how much voltage it's going to let through before it cuts the signal. Our diode, for example, these ones will allow a certain amount of voltage through before it clips. And then our other diode facing the opposite direction will let a certain amount of voltage through and then it'll clip. Right. Now these guys, because I'm only going to fit diodes in one direction with these ones, we're only going to clip one half of the signal. So if I was to draw the sine wave then, here's our sine wave. As it's only going to clip one half, we're going to come up here. There's our clean part of the signal. And as we go to the side that we decided to clip, it's going to look like this. And we're going to have one side clean and one side's clipped. And that gives like a rougher edge. It kind of makes a tube screamer sound not tube screamery, if that makes sense. So the distortion isn't quite as round and clear. I'm using terrible tone descriptors there, but that's basically what it's going to do. Because these germanium diodes, they're not very strong, i.e. the amount of voltage that they're going to let through here before they clip is probably going to be somewhere around here, a bit lower, because they just don't let as much through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire two of them together in series. So we'll have diode, this is a symbol for the diode, and then another diode straight after it. So instead of having that amount of voltage, so the first diode's going to probably let that much through, and then the second diode is going to allow the other half of that length through as well. So then we get around the comparable output to one of these diodes. And I haven't actually measured these yet. We will get to that. So that's how I'm going to wire them up, and it'll give two options. If you're an uber geek and you really want to start testing diodes and messing about with diodes, which I highly recommend, we have our tester here. On mine, if I go round to the ohm setting, it could be on any of them. This little yellow symbol at the top here means that I can cycle through and get to this diode symbol here, which means I'm going to be able to measure diodes. Right, and you'll get a little diode. I don't know how well this will show up on the camera, but you're going to get a little diode symbol there. We're going to take our diode, I'm going to put our leads either side of it, and it should give us a reading. So this diode will allow 0.271272 volts to go through. If we mix our leads the opposite way round, it doesn't let any through because they only work in one direction, which is why we have 1 point in one way and 1 point in the other way when we're doing symmetrical clipping, is because they only work in one direction. So it doesn't work that way, does however work that way. So 2.72 volts for the germanium diode for these particular ones. The Soviet made these, real nice diodes. And now for our silicon diode, this has got 0.567 volts. So as you can see, it's almost twice the voltage of the germanium. So our other germanium is at 0.265 volts. Great. So now we know that when we wire these together, I mean, I won't wire them together. I'll just give them a twist and I'll show you what I mean. So if we add these two together, and they've got to be pointing in the same direction to do this. You can do this with any two. You could mix match germanium silicon. You could use LEDs, MOSFET, all of this jazz. But for me, I know how these diodes sound and I like them. So now we've made two diodes pointing at each other. And if I go either side of that, no voltage because I've got them the wrong way. Well done, Joe. This way round, we get 0.49293. Still going up a little bit. So this now is going to be our asymmetrical clipping. So it's going to allow one side of the sine wave through on its own, clip the other side. And then this side here is going to be our symmetrical clipping, because this diode's going to clip this side and this diode is going to clip this side. Now, also, the switch I use is 3 positions. So there's 3 positions we can have. We've got our symmetrical, our asymmetrical. Now in the center position, I have it set so then it won't clip anything. The reason for this is, if you want a high headroom, clean, high fidelity, it's my favorite setting if you can't tell on a tube screamer, signal, you're going to have it with no clipping diodes. So it allows the whole of this signal through. And the only clipping you might get, probably not in this type of pedal, would be the op amp, which you're not going to get in a tube screamer. You more get that in a rat. But what you do get is the drive from your amplifier or other effects pedals that you're hitting with the tube screamer. So the high headroom setting is by far my favorite setting. I hope that helped explain clipping. And now we're going to go to actually taking out the clipping diodes from the circuit and adding in our own on a switch. So what we're going to do is, just for clarity, if you want to do this yourself, the labelled up as D1 and D2 on this Joyo circuit is right next to this op amp here. There's these 2 little clipping diodes. Now what you can do is, or what you should do, I should say, is if I was being professional, which I never am, I would remove these diodes, pull them out, get some solder socket or something on there, remove the solder, and then rehouse wires through it. But from experience, these boards, although these are great pedals, the boards aren't amazing, and the little eyelet on the board sometimes comes out and it's a pain. So what I'm going to do is clip these diodes out as close to the diode as I can, and the 2 longest little legs, I'm just going to make a hook, and then make a hook with a cable, and I'm going to fire that cable over to my switch, which is here, and then I'm going to wire the diodes onto this switch. So if you're interested in that, while we're here, we might as well explain that. Stand by for another Joe age 5 diagram. So we have here our circuit. So here's our power line coming through, our signal line. It's putting signal through here. Now to get to our diodes, this is a real rough drawing. We're probably going to have one diode here and one diode here. They're pointing in opposite directions because they're going to be symmetrical clipping. As we said before, we're going to have 1 pointing that way and 1 pointing that way, and then the signal comes out here. And that's basically how they're wired up on this board. So if I was to clip here and clip here, clip here and clip here, no matter which leg I take now, as long as I'm taking one from one side and one from the other side of the diodes, it's going to be connected to this point here and this point here. So the idea being is I'm going to take my wire from here, it's going to go over, and the wire from here, the opposite side of the diode, is going to go over here to my switch. Now, as I've shown you before, this is our switch. Got a lug here and a lug here, which is going to have our asymmetrical diode in. And it's got a lug here and a lug here, which is going to have our symmetrical diodes in. Oh my God, I am really terrible at drawing, but there you go. So there's our asymmetrical and symmetrical, and then we've got our two lugs in the center, which we're going to attach our wires to. Now, how this works, our signal is going to come down here. It's going to go to the switch and then from the switch here. When the switch is in the center position, these two lugs here, the in and out, are not connected to anything. So we take the diodes completely out of the circuit. We don't have them, and we increase our signal to be this big sine wave, as shown before. If we click our switch down, oddly enough, in the down position, it connects these two lugs here to these two lugs here. So these will be connected, which means that the signal comes through here and goes to this side of the diode and through here to this side of the diode. Now, that's only going to clip in one direction, so we will get our asymmetrical clipping. And if we change the switch to the up position, that way it's going to connect these two lugs here. This lug's going to connect to this one, and this lug's going to connect to this one, which means that our signal is going to come through here to this lug, be clipped one direction by one diode, and through here to this lug. It's going to clip in the opposite direction to give us our symmetrical clipping, which is going to look something like that. Now that we've got the board and stuff out the way, as ever, I'm going to use my favorite Knipex snippers. I've got about 10 pairs of these by now. Thank you very much to Reeves Electro for suggesting these. They're unbelievable. And yes, I know I should get a heat gun. I've got a heat gun. My wife bought me one many years ago. But I just like using a lighter. And I know it's not the best way to do it. First of all, we have our germanium diodes. Next, we've got our two vintage Japanese silicon diodes. Now, as you can see, the little blue lines on here, sometimes it's a black line on some diodes or multicolored lines on others. But this little line here, we want to have them at opposite ways from each other. So then one is clipping one way, one's clipping the other way. Now, what I like to do is just line them up together like this, and then just give them a twist at each end. As such. Right, I'm just going to put a bit of solder there, and then I'll be able to clip one of these leads off and place the other lead through our switch. We have our symmetrical clipping and our asymmetrical clipping. All I'll have to do now is, once this circuit is fitted inside the enclosure, I'll run these two cables through and connect one to this side and one to that side. It really doesn't matter which way round you get these wires, as long as they're connected to here, and here we have our clipping circuit. Right, next on the cards is our little tone capacitor, if you will. So over here, this capacitor in the middle, we're going to change this out for a 220 NF. That's where we're going to start. Some people go up as high as 400. Generally, I like maybe 100 NF, but I want Gordon to be able to hear the difference in this and know that I've actually done something to this pedal. So this one out here, First, I mean, you could make this switchable. You could add a switch and add different clipping options, but you're limited for space inside the enclosure, which brings me on to my next point. He's also, from a previous pedal build or picture he's seen on Instagram, asked me if I'd use some of these vintage Soviet paper and oil capacitors. And as you can see, compared to the circuit, this is actually pretty massive. So to fit this, I'm going to have to run 2 wires from the circuit, as I have with the clipping circuit, and mount this where the battery actually normally goes. So apologies, Gordon, you're going to lose that battery option, which I'm pretty sure he doesn't use. We're going to run two wires down, and we're going to mount this massive cap in that position. Now this cap's non-polar, that meaning that once I remove this cap here, the old cap, if I remove that and run 2 wires, it doesn't matter which way round them wires go and which way round they connect to this. I mean, technically there is ways to test which end would be connected to earth and which end. There's loads of people orient their caps on some of the older ones. If we look at these orange ones, they denote the outside foil on this edge here, so you can orient the caps the right way around. Maybe that makes sense in a high voltage amplifier. In something like a 9-volt pedal, I seriously question that. Then again, there are people like Eric Johnson who can hear if a bulb has been put in or a light is put in the opposite way round in a Tweed Deluxe. So much better hearing than myself. Anyway, let's go. Another thing is I'm going to actually create hooks on this and mount it in so then you can see the writing on it. So if I get my, here's one I made earlier, my Blue Peter moment. This is going to be the pedal. I'm going to run 2 wires coming from underneath the board. They're going to come down underneath all of this and come out the bottom here. And this cap is going to be situated just there. So it's going to be sat here. I'm going to glue that in place, and I'm going to glue it in such a way that you can see the writing. So when he removes the battery cover, he can see this cap there. Right, so that's how it's going to go. So having soldered them on, I just had a thought, this being a really old capacitor, I need to test it really to make sure that it is putting out the capacitance that I want, that we want even, and there's no ESR, which is resistance. I know the R stands for resistance. Is it electrostatic resistance? I don't know. Anyway, some sort of resistance that's bad. A little bit of resistance is going to be okay. So here we have 9.2 ohms, which is reasonably, it's on the high side from what I would expect. I wouldn't put this in a guitar amplifier, put it that way. However, for this application, I think we are going to be okay. When I was starting out building pedals, I made the mistake of buying all these vintage components and I like off eBay and I think it was Small Bear Electronics back then over in the US. And a lot of the components really weren't up to the task. So a lot of my first build didn't actually work and I got really disheartened and I wasn't sure why and thought it was me. And all I really needed was something like this multifunction tester. You can just clip it up, attach a component and see what's going on with it. So I really recommend, if you're going to be using vintage components, buy yourself one of these multifunction testers. They don't cost a lot off Amazon. I do highly recommend these. They're not super accurate, but hey, good enough for government work, as we say. Right, now next we're going to remove this cap from the board. So I know that if I'm looking at the top side here, I've got a resistor, a capacitor, then the capacitor I want, and then a capacitor after it, and then where our clip and diodes go. So I flip this board over. I've got a resistor, the big capacitor that I don't want, and then these two here, these are the ones that I want. So what I'm going to do is, not the most technical way and not the way you should do it. Really, I should heat it up, solder sucker, and then just remove the component. That would be too professional, sensible, and it's not really how we do it here at Hello Sailor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this side up while simultaneously jabbing my multifunction covered in glue electrical screwdriver underneath the component and flicking it out in an unprofessional manner. Let's go. Always want to get a little bit of solder on the tip of your soldering iron before that, because solder is the best form of heat transfer. So or the best thing for heat transfer, should I say. So if there's a little bit of solder on the end there, the heat transfer is a little easier, which means that you'd have your soldering iron on the circuit board for less time, which is always a good thing. This capacitor here, can you see that? Probably not. But if you can't see it, it says 473J, which is 47 is the denomination, and 3 lets you know at what point of the scale it is. So UF, PF, NF, not in that order, obviously. Joe H5 again. So if we were working in NF, this is 47 NF, because 3 is nanofarads. If it was in 4, we'd be in microfarads, which is labeled UF for some reason. God knows why. It took me a long time to come to terms with that. My brain can't work that way. Why would you not just call it MF? Maybe that means something else. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer. If we go down to 2, that is our PF, so picofarads. So right now this is 47 NF, and we're going to increase it to 0.22 UF, which is the same as saying 220 NF. So it's going from 47 NF to 220 NF. To make sure that this is going to fit, you could measure this out beforehand or after you fitted it into the enclosure. But what I find is helpful is I have a spare one. Fit this in here, and then we can actually see how long it's going to be. So I'm going to glue it in here. We want our cables to come together and run the length of this. And if we can make it to the end of the circuit board, that is going to be long enough for me. So I'm going to clip them there, and then I'm going to go ahead and heat shrink them up and fit them to the board. Another thing to note is the holes in this board are particularly tiny. I use 24 gauge wire here, cable in the navy, but wire, which is quite thick. Sometimes I go down to 26 gauge, which is better. But because it's quite thick, all I'm going to do is I'm going to spread out the wire. And again, if I'm being too basics to you folks who are more advanced in electronics, should probably give up watching this by now, I suppose. I'm going to spread this wire out. I'm just going to clip half of it off, and that will make it much easier to thread through the circuit board. Once I get to that point, it will go into the hole much easier and save faffing about and adding loads of heat to the circuit, which could then damage something else. And again, when you come to thread this through the circuit, don't leave the end of your wire really long. It makes it really difficult to thread through. You're much better, I found through experience, making it short like that. And again, I'm going to go to the top of the board, because when it's sat in a pedal that way round, I want the wire to run, or cable, I'm going to say that every single time, I want the wire to run underneath the board so it's out the way, and that gives me space on top for our rather large spray capacitors. Next step is going to be to remove the 2 electrolytic capacitors C6 and C5. We're going to remove them pretty much in the same manner as we remove C4, which is our tone capacitor, if you will. When I'm doing these ones, because I'm fitting these rather large Sprague caps, I'm actually going to mount these to the back of this board here as such. Now, the leads of these ones, the legs, are really, really thick, and I'm probably going to have difficulty squeezing them through the holes on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cheap resistor, clean the legs up. Once I've removed the caps, I will insert the resistor legs through the holes so they poke out, and I'll use that to make a hook as per everything else I've done so far on this board. And I'll make a hook and I'll attach them to this to the capacitor. And I'll make sure that I just stick this capacitor down with a little bit of epoxy so it doesn't move around. And that's how we're going to do it. Also, while we're here, So I'm going to use these two capacitors here. If I can squeeze them in. They are old capacitors. Let me see, is there a date code on these? Probably, but not that I can read. Anyway, they're older capacitors, so I'm going to test them. Otherwise, we never know. And these ones tend not to go bad, if I'm being honest. Maybe sometimes in amplifiers they do, where they're subjected to high voltage, but these are new old stock. They haven't been used. The leads are brand new, so they should be good. And on this one here, as you see, it's reading 243 NF with 9 ohms ESR. It's got a 0.1% voltage loss, which isn't bad at all. They have drifted slightly, but for what I'm going to use them for, they are perfect. And when removing these ones, previously I got my multi-tool / screwdriver underneath and pull them out, because these caps are nice and long. If you're quick enough, you can just put your finger on one side of it, and when you heat it up, lean with your finger up against it. The leg should pop out. It shouldn't get too hot. Now, to find these capacitors, I know with this one I've got my power switch here, or my power socket, and then straight down from it I should have my capacitor and my resistor. So if I go straight down from it, these two here, that looks like the resistor to me. So there's your resistor, and then this one here attached to earth, and this one here, these look like my two capacitor legs. Find this capacitor here. I know that we've got these resistors here, so there's 1, 2, 3 resistors with a transistor above it, which is 3 legs. So if we flip the board over, we've got 1, 2, 3 resistors, and then this here, 2 legs dotted together. One is actually connected to them resistors, which doesn't matter. These 2 legs here must be our capacitor, and these 3 legs here must be our transistor. Previously discussed, we're not going to use this battery snap, mainly because we won't have space for it once we apply this. So I'm going to just clip that out. If we follow it round, it attaches onto the board there. So take that out of the way, and then we've got space for our rather large capacitors to go in. Also, when we're mounting these large capacitors to the top of this board, we want to make sure that we've got enough space. So if I side by side it here, we can see that I've got this much depth in the actual enclosure itself to fit the capacitor in. So height wise, it's going to fit in. Now, if you look closely when you're doing this, and I've fell foul of this plenty of times, got all excited, bought myself the largest possible components, because that's what I always do to make it hard for myself, and measured it up against the enclosure. Oh look, it fits. But what actually you're measuring it up against is where this recessed screw hole is here, because that's where the base is going to sit in. It's going to butt up against these here. So what you want to do is get your capacitor as close to that as you can, and make sure that you've got some clearance for the base to fit on. I've done this before, tested the pedal, went to put the bottom on to fit it to my board, and then lo and behold, you can't fit the bottom on. So now I know that they're going to fit. What else we need to do is make sure that there's enough space to actually get 2 of them in there sensibly to be able to, well, fit the 2 of them in. Now, I'm going to put one here, which is going to attach to these 2, which is just here. I'll be able to bend them leads into place. And this one here, which is attaching to these, is probably going to be best sat just there. So this side, and that will all fit in. I am going to again orientate them so then the spray is pointing upwards so people can see what value they are if they wanted to look in the future to do repairs, mods, whatever. Right, now to fix these down, I'm just going to use some of this fast curing epoxy. Mega Bond is the brand that I quite like. I'm just going to use a dab of that underneath each one just to secure them down so they don't rattle around in there and come loose, cause any problems in the future. Told you this was a multi-tool screwdriver. Fantastic. While that's curing, I'm going to do the most important mod. Now, if any of you guys are like myself, when I first got into guitar pedal modifications, around about that time, 2008, I started messing about with electronics and so forth. My main thing, all I wanted out of a pedal was a blue LED. And as you can see here, this is red, which clearly won't do. I wanted a blue LED just because it was like the Keeley compressor at the time, and the Keeley modded blues driver that had a blue LED. I knew nothing about the mods inside the blues driver. All I knew was that he changed this LED for blue, and I wanted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the LED in this one to a purple LED because that's what I've got. I like to use these 5mm clear LEDs. Now, when you're wiring up an LED, inside it you can see there's like a little. I mean, I'm not too sure you'll get to see this on the camera, but the metal plate inside, there's like a slight cutout, like a line that leads towards one of the leads in an odd shape. That line points towards the uppermost part of it, the bit that's closest to the top, points towards the live, which is also the longest leg. Now, the new component, fantastic, we can just go to the longest leg, no problem. However, when it's fitted in the circuit already, we can't go to the longest leg because they've been cut short, so we don't know. On this one here, I can tell that pointing down, again, I don't think you can see it, is the little cutout is pointing down. So that to me says that this downside is the live. You'd like to think they label it up on these, but they don't. And it hasn't been soldered in particularly well by the look of it. The live is on the downside. So just to remind myself, because I can't tell you how many times I've took LEDs out of pedals and then gone to solder in a new LED, and lo and behold, I've got a memory like a goldfish and I've forgotten which side was the live side. So I'm just going to take a red marker and I'm just going to dab the bottom of that there so I know that side is live, and then that way when I have my goldfish moment and forget, I've got it right there. Sometimes these you'll find have a plastic sleeving on. The newer ones definitely have a plastic sleeving on the top. So this one here is a newer one, and it'll have a plastic sleeve around it. I just unsolder the LED in exactly the same manner. You can reuse this plastic sleeving, and that'll let you know how long it's going to be, or it needs to be. But with the LED I've got, if I just get it in there, that's going to be pretty much bang on the right length. Then we have our LED out pretty clean. That come out a lot easier than I thought it was going to. And not to keep banging on about it, but as we can see, got a red dot at the bottom, so the long lead is going towards the bottom. Before fitting all of this back in the pedal and then going to test the LED and it doesn't work, I'm going to just test it now while it's on. So I've got my power lead, plug that in. And another thing I've found on these pedals, which when I was starting out, I found out the hard way. Oh, look, it doesn't work. And I was all shocked. Like, oh no, it definitely doesn't work. But what it is that it needs an input jack in there to activate the circuit, much in the same way that you would have on an old fuzz pedal. Once you plug your input in, it activates the battery. Well, this does the same. So is our input jack. And our LED now works nice and purple. So I recommend testing it before you fit it in a circuit. In the next clip, we're going to hear how our modified circuit sounds when pitted against the original unmodified circuit and one of my SRV TS808 point-to-point wired circuits. It's a bit of a different circuit to this one. It's had some stuff removed and it's much different, but it does have the clip and switch the same as our modified one does. Well, for this comparison, we're going to stick to just symmetrical clipping because this circuit here has only got symmetrical clipping. So just to be fair to it, we're going to stick with symmetrical clipping on both of these. One thing I will say is I'm expecting this to sound treblier, thinner, and these to sound fuller. Simple changes for a potentially massive sound. Let's hear how the mod sounds. But before we get to that, I'd like to say, please, if you could, just press the subscribe button. It helps YouTube know that I bring value to you and they'll share my content to more people. That'll help me get more reach, more views, more subscribers, help me grow, and I'll be able to bring more value to you. Thank you. Now honestly, for the longest time, I just wasn't an SRV guy. Stevie Ray's playing's amazing, but that sort of high headroom tone thing and the spikiness, it just didn't work for me until I tried this mod. It really opened up a new avenue of tone for me, and hopefully it'll do the same for you. This is everything you're going to need for today's mod. I have already, as ever, finished our enclosure off. I mean, it's nothing to do with SRV. I should have probably put his face on there, but I didn't want to labour the point. We are doing the SRV mod. So I've drilled some extra holes. We lose the capability, as ever with my mods, of having a battery, fine. But we have 3 extra switches, so you've got to drill 3 extra holes if you want to do them. You can hardwire any of these mods straight in to the PCB if you want, rather than adding them on a switch. But I will be adding 3 switches today. Now, so what are the mods? First, we're going to do switchable diodes as ever, but this time with a twist. Over here, we've got gold, basically. These are MA150. I think they're made by Panasonic, but MA150, the vintage Japanese diodes. These are the ones that come in a very, very, very first TS808. Just the first couple of pedals, not all of them. I come across these through a friend of mine Simon, who you will no doubt seen on my live stream by the time that this video is released. He'll have been on the Pedal Dive podcast, probably telling us all about this mod in much more detail than I can. He's a living legend, and he put me onto these diodes, and they sound great. But now, to oppose them, I'm going to have my usual and favourite setting of no clipping diodes, always. And I'm also going to have asymmetrical with some 1N4007s, as ever, because I do like them too. Now, the next mod we're going to do, if I get the picture of the form up now, if anyone wants this form, by the way, please write in the comments and let me know, and I'll try and get one to you. It'll just be an email with it on. So the first mod we're going to do after our diodes is going to be our input cap, and I'm going to change that for these three caps here. So we'll have, right now it's a 10NF. I'm going to change it so it can be 10NF, 20NF, 22NF, or 10UF, and that is the one that is in the SRV TS808. Also the story goes. Anyway, this is the one that's in the mod, but I'll put it switchable from the original, which will be a Soviet made in Ukraine vintage cap. Vintage? I suppose it is vintage now, isn't it? And a new old stock Mullard. Then the output cap is here, which is 10UF, but it's an electrolytic, fairly cheap one. I'm going to swap it for a non-polar one. If anything, it'll just reduce the noise. And then lastly, or not leastly, well, it's not last, but the last component change we're going to do is this small cap here. That is to soften the clipping diodes. It just takes the edges off the signal. Best way to describe it, it's a 51pf cap, but I'm going to make that switchable between, because in the SRV mod, let's clarify, in the SRV mod, this is clipped out and we have no softening effect, which doesn't surprise me considering his tone. But I'm going to make it switchable between a 47pf cap, which is pretty close to the 51pf, you're no doubt not going to hear any difference, 180pf cap, high precision, or no cap in the middle position, which will give us our SRV tone. Now, one other thing which I find is probably the most interesting mod of this pedal, and I'm pretty sure Simon will agree because I remember discussing this with him, oh god, must have been round about late 2017, early 2018 when I first started speaking to him. We discussed this circuit, and this is the mod. So these two caps here are coupling caps, they're 1UF. Now they don't do anything other than couple two parts of the circuit together, and on the SRV mod these come out and they get replaced with jumpers. That's it, just our offcuts from our components, so I advise that you save your offcuts as ever. First I am going to start with the jumpers, just because it's a nice easy mod, get myself all warmed up, wetting the tip early on and get my eye in for soldering. That is both caps now removed and a jumper placed in their place. Next I'm going to go ahead and remove this 10UF output cap and replace it for a non-polar. Here's an interesting conundrum. Let's see if I can get it in shot. So just here you'll see one leg of our 10UF output cap. Now the pad has actually come off the PCB, which is not ideal. These PCBs are quite finicky, the holes are quite slim on them. It's not like modifying a Boss pedal, which is a breeze, or even better yet, something like a TC Electronic pedal. They're made amazing. These, the PCB, it's good, but it's not brilliant. Anyway, the component leg's sticking through, so what I am going to do is I'm just going to run a wire or an offcut of a component leg. I'm going to follow the line round and it attaches right here, and I'm just going to make the manual attachment myself. I absolutely started this video without taping down that multi-cable band. What a mistake that was. No legs come out, but could have. Now our input cap. Our input cap is going to be these three caps here, 10NF, 22NF and 10UF. I imagine between these two it's going to be very hard to hear the difference unless you have volume, I would suggest. And then with this one, I think this is what's going to sound best because this is what's in the SRV mod, but you should hear a marked difference. Here's just this cap here, so I'm going to remove that, and I'm not going to place anything in its place other than two wires, because of course we're going to run them out to a switch. As I have shown many times before, the PCB holes on these are quite small, so I do suggest that you use the fan out and halving technique for your stranded cable. If we take out some strands from the cable, give it a twist, this makes it thinner. It'll slot right in the PCB hole with less issue. There we have our first two wires in place. There is the input cap. They'll run to our switch, no problem. I've just put a bit of heat shrink around them to keep them together. Next, I'm going to remove both the clipping diodes that are here and that softening cap, the 51PF cap that's right next to them. I'm going to remove both of them together so it gives me space to get in there and fit some wires. Now, one thing to remember when you're fitting wires to your clipping diodes, you don't need to do both diodes because they're both connected to each other. So when I remove them, I'm just going to do this diode closest to the IC, which is already a 4558 IC, which is what I would change it to anyway. Actually, I prefer this TL072. I know it's cheaper. I know I shouldn't. And I think if it was £30 per op amp, the TL072, I think people would be raving about them. But because they're the cheapest, no one likes them. Anyway, yeah, these are really good op amps anyway, so you don't need to change that. But I'm going to use this diode closest to it. I'm going to run my cables from there, or my wires from there. And that's mainly just to give me space to run wires from this one as well. There is one more onboard mod that I forgot to mention, and I forgot because I don't normally do this mod. However, seems as we're doing an SRV mod, I might as well do the whole thing rather than just what I like. And it is, of course, this 500k pot gets changed out for a 1 meg pot. Now, I couldn't get the longer leg versions of these in time for this video, so what I am going to do is I'm just going to snip the legs off at that height, and then I'm going to tack solder these on straight to it. Now, I know internet's going to hate me for this, and it's not the correct way. I get it. I'm terrible. I'm the worst. But it is going to sound good, so let's get it done. So I've now removed the 500k pot. I just simply clipped it out, and I've clipped these parts as close to the pot as I can, and then straighten them out, and that gives me a nice straight edge coming up. For the pot I'm replacing into, all I've done is I've bent the legs down in a 90-degree fashion, reasonably close to the body, and they will just simply interlock over the top of the ones that are there. I'll tack solder one on, so then it's in place, and then I'll solder the other two correctly and go back and solder that one on. And that should give us the correct spacing, so then it fits in the enclosure without any hassle. Just for clarity, this is it. I've tack soldered the most inboard lug, and the other two are just resting up against the old pins that are coming out. I'm going to solder the other two in correctly. Then once they're firm, then I'll go back and resolder the one that I tack soldered, and that should give me the exact spacing. Now, if all this messing about doesn't rip these cables out, nothing will. Now it's time to tackle the diodes. I've got to say, I didn't really get along with the blue tack method too much. I think I'm just stuck in my old ways, so I will be doing my own little thing again with these. With your MA150s now, we're going to wire them in series so we get asymmetrical clipping. So rather than wire them in opposite directions, if I can get it right, come on Joe, as such, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire them one into another like that. So we've got both of these diodes pushing, that one pushing into that one, or whatever, vice versa, whichever way round it goes. I was pointing to the negative then, but there you go. On one half of the signal will be clipped by two MA150 diodes. Now, I've seen contrasting evidence on online about which way round this went for the SRV Mod Tube Screamer. Some people put them in a normal way, some people double them up. I'm keen to speak to Simon on Monday. As I'm filming this, it's Friday. I'm keen to speak to Simon on Monday on our live show and find out which way round he does it. But for me, I'm going to wire them both together on one half of the signal because I really like asymmetrical clipping. How to wire our diodes onto the switch. I'm going to do the MA50s on this side, a little wet to the tip. Again, diodes are one component along with transistors and pots that you can actually damage with heat, so it's worth, and ICs if you're op amps and stuff like that, if you're soldering them in. I would normally use a plug, but there you go. They can be heat damaged, so you know you've got to get enough heat in them to make a good connection, but don't go overboard. And then with these legs, I've just made my little triangle that I showed in the Mojo video, linked above if anyone wants to watch that. Now to do this, I'm going to just bend the legs inboard a little bit onto each other, and then they should fit the gap. I've got enough space in this pedal that I don't need to be trying to cram them in like I did with the Mojo. There was a lot to get in there, but I think we're all right with this one. There we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and solder in the caps for the input cap and for the softening cap, if you like. So the softening cap is straightforward. There's going to be a cap this side, a cap this side, same as the diodes. Center position will be open, as in no cap, same as the diodes. Now the input cap, center position will be the 10 NF cap. That is the least. Then when I flick to one side, I'll get the 22 NF cap in conjunction with the 10 NF cap, which will give me 32 NF. And then when I flip it the other way, we're going to get the 10 UF, and the 10 NF will be in there as well, but it will make literally no difference at that point. So when I'm soldering them in, I've got two choices. I can either leave the 10 NF cap legs long and solder my wires coming from the PCB to the legs, or I can tack solder them at the top and leave enough space to poke the wires in the bottom and solder them that way. I haven't quite decided which way I'm going to go, but we shall see. Not entirely sure why, but just as I was soldering the caps in, I decided to change the 22 NF for a 47 NF cap, and as it's not the 10 UF SRV cap, I'm quite happy that I'm just going to make it up as I go along. I think that'll just make a bigger jump in tonal difference, and maybe we'll hear it better. Who knows? Maybe I need to still get it up to volume to get it to sound the way that I want. I've got two switches, and I'm going to put the one with the caps on its own on this side, and I'm going to put the one with the clipping diodes and the one with the softening cap next to each other, just because they both sort of operate on the same part of the circuit. It just kind of makes sense in my brain to put them two together. That is all the switches wired up, and for those of you pulling your hair out for the last 10 minutes telling me, Joe, you don't need to run two sets of wires to these, you are indeed correct. These are basically on the same, so it's these three connections here. Is it them three? Yes, they're on the same leg, so really they're all connected. I didn't really need to run two sets of wires, but you know what, my mind kind of likes that they're there. So this side we have our soft switch, soft or hard, 3 settings, asymmetrical silicon or asymmetrical silicon MA150s on this side, and then we've got our tone switch. I'm going to fit this foot switch now, tighten everything up, get our Dumbley style knobs on there, and then we'll see where we are. Here we have it, our finished Joyo Vintage Overdrive to SRV Mod Tube Screamer. Now comes the fun bit, the sound sample. Let's dial in some of that SRV bite. If you're enjoying these tone hacks, please hit the subscribe button. It really does help YouTube figure out that you love all of this solder-filled madness. The ultimate overdrive is normally in the pound dirt box category. You know, the bargain basement bin that no one looks in. Add in these real easy to do beginner mods and you've got a pedal that's contending for a place above the OCD. Regular viewers will know that I love to set out an A4 piece of paper with all of my components on for any of these mods. However, today we've only got 4 components, so I figured we'd just lay it out like this. We've got a 1.5k resistor, a 470k resistor, 100k audio pot or log pot, and 100 NF capacitor Well, actually, this is a 91 NF capacitor, mainly because I've got these really cool old Philips tropical fish caps, and I thought I want to use them. So let's get cracking. Here we have the Joyo Ultimate Drive PCB. First thing to note is that these wires attaching the board to the stomp switchboard are absolutely atrocious. I do recommend replacing them, but for today I've just added some epoxy over the top of them so then they don't come out while I'm doing the mod. The first mod we're going to do is we're going to change out the volume pot for this 100k log pot. Now this is this pot here. If you want to see how I remove parts from a PCB, please go ahead and watch my BD2 mod video where I explain how I remove parts from the board. Well, we've hit our first hurdle, who would have known? So first of all, looking back over the schematic and looking at the board itself, this pot is actually a 500k pot, not 100k. So I've got to change it for a 500k log and not a 100k log. So I very nearly fell into my first hurdle. I made a mistake. This is why you should really lay out all of your components on an A4 piece of paper before you start. Next, we're going to change the taper of our tone pot. To do this, we're going to solder a 1.5k resistor across the two outside wipers of the pot. Now, you may find it easier to do this on the underside of the board. I'm going to do it here. And not only that, when someone opens the back up, they can see that the pedal's been modified. Now, handily, my resistor is exactly the width of the soldered pads inside here, so I'll be able to just bend the legs straight down in this sort of fashion, and they should go straight on there. I'm not going to like try and slot them inside of the hole, because obviously the pot legs are going in there. What I am going to do is I'm just going to solder directly to it and then bend the resistor up, and there we have it. Our resistor is now on top of the board, and we're going to do the same thing again for our gain pot, which is this one here. Currently this is a 1 meg pot, so we're going to solder a 500k resistor across it, and that'll bring down this value accordingly. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to solder it on the top of here, so that then when someone opens it up, they can see this nice vintage resistor. And again, there's our next resistor in position. Next, we're going to go ahead and install our nice Philips tropical fish cap. We're going to be replacing C9, which is situated here, which is an electrolytic cap, with this cap here. If you want to see how I go ahead and replace capacitors, again, I've mentioned it. The BD2 video I did is linked above now. I definitely show how to manipulate the legs and how to get these caps out. There is C9 replaced. Now that'll give us a bit less bass in the pedal. It definitely sounds a bit better. The one thing that Joyo did wrong when they were, well, mainly the one thing that they did wrong when they were cloning this pedal, is this diode here, which is labelled as D2, is a germanium diode, and it's actually been put in the wrong way round. The silk screen on the PCB is actually wrong. So I suggest clipping it out and then putting it back in from this side, but flipping it over 180 degrees. I'm going to check if I've got a replacement diode rather than trying to save this one, because they're a bit of a pain to get out in one piece. Here is the germanium diode that I've just took out of the pedal. Now the leads are a bit short on this for me to turn it round and put it back in, and they're really sensitive to heat, so taking it out could well have damaged it. We'll see in a second. Now if you go back to my tube screamer video, you'll get a really boring, please don't fall asleep, a really boring description and a tutorial on how to test diodes and how to retrofit them into your pedals. Now I haven't got one of these diodes. I'm assuming it's a, I don't even know what type of diode it is. I haven't got one of them, but I have got this old Soviet germanium diode. So what I'm going to do now is if I don't throw my screwdriver everywhere first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to test to see, my Fluke can test the forward voltage of diodes. Again, I did describe how to do this in a video above. I'm going to test both of them and see what forward voltage we have to see if we're in the ballpark. So the one we've just took out tests as 0.254, and the one that I'm hoping to put in tests as 0.314. Right, that's close enough for government work to me, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the vintage Soviet germanium. Just a side note, as you can see here, this old Soviet germanium actually has the diode symbol on the sides of it there, so that really helps in orientation, but I'm pretty sure that the diodes you guys are going to be using may not have that on, so using a multimeter to test it is pretty much essential. Now, as you can see here, that's the diode in place. It's a little bit close to this resistor, but there's enough space in between them. And again, like in previous videos, you'll see that I've raised my components off the board just to keep them out of the way. When you're doing this, the best thing to think about is these two jacks have to fit in the pedal. So as long as you're below them, you're good. Right, it's time to get this back in the pedal and hear what it sounds like. That's all the mods done. Now comes the sound sample. I'd like to know in the comments if you think that I've nailed this one, if it's anywhere near an OCD, or if you think it should belong in a bargain bin. Let me know in the comments. Now comes the tremolo. I thought this one would be the easiest mod out the lot of them. However, it almost broke me. Who'd have thought shaping a wave would be so hard? Now, we finally got this one working, and it was worth every head scratching moment. I'll let you decide what you think of this mod. We're going to do this all live together. Now, I don't actually know what this mod kit entails. I haven't looked at it at all. The only thing I do know is that I'm not going to use these two yellow knobs because I've refinished my enclosure and they would look out of place. So as you see, the kit comes with a scan me code. So I'm going to take my phone and I'm just going to scan the QR code. Together, we'll go through this and see what comes up. I hope this makes for a good video. Right, so this is the awesome PDF you get. Now, I'm not going to show this PDF just out of respect for 5Cats pedals. So I'm going to move this to the side. But as you can see, scanning the QR code works really well. And this PDF looks incredibly well made. It does actually have pictures of the kit and what you need to do inside. So it's real precise. It tells you the exact resistors that you're going to need to pull and so on. So let's get into it. Let's remove this, the kit itself from the packet, and we'll see what we get with it. Bearing in mind, this costs next to nothing. The pedal costs like £18, maybe £19, and the kit cost about £10, which is basically nothing. So I've got rid of our two
5 hours later.
Knobs, or what are the
6.5 hours later.
Yeah, so I've got rid of our two knobs. You get two pots, which are going to be our extra two pots. I've drilled the enclosure, so they're going to be situated where they're situated. You also get this 4.7 UF cap. It's a suntan. That's a good one. They're expensive. And two resistors. Now, first things first, it said to remove R1. Now, R1 is at the side of this IC. There's three of them. R1 is this bottom one right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that like I do on all videos. I'll draw your attention either to my, well, go straight to my BD2 mod video and you'll see how I remove components from the board of a pedal if you're interested in that. Next it says to attach 2 wires to this. These wires are going to go to a 10k pot and a 47k resistor. So I'm just going to go ahead and sort out that pot. After attaching the first wire, of course, I've realised that the wire gauge I'm using, which I'm going to say is 26, gauge 26, is a little bit too thick to fit through the PCB hole. So I'm just going to show you how I slim down a wire. So first of all, it's stranded wire. I'll flatten it out using my snips, and then that sort of gives you a fan effect. And I'm going to cut half of the strands away. Now, if this seems obvious to some people, it really wasn't obvious to me for the longest time. So anyway, cut half of them away, and then that way there's less strands. So when I twist it up, you actually have a thinner wire. I'm going to go ahead and tin that, and then I can use it. And of course, to tin it, I'm going to wet the tip. Thank you, Jamie, for reminding me about that in a message today. And here's where Hello Sailor Joe comes out. Instead of using the 47k resistor that's provided with this kit, which there's nothing wrong with, by the way. It's a carbon comp resistor. It's really nice. Carbon film resistor. I've actually got this tantalum resistor. These are like stupidly expensive. So I'm, you know, some of them can get up to like 10 or 15 pounds for one resistor, which is ridiculous. I'm going to go ahead and use that in this kit just because I have it, and I'm going to sell this pedal afterwards. So I want people to know that they're getting value for money. Not that that isn't value for money, but I just kind of like knowing that this is in there. Flame me in the comments telling me it doesn't matter what resistor you use as long as the value's the same. Most probably in this application, I agree, but I don't care. We have our first pot and the 47k resistor attached to the board. And next, we're going to be changing C5, which is, let me get this right, somewhere around here. There's C5 right there. So I'm going to switch out C5. If you would like to see again how I take these components out, please do watch that BD2 video. Now that our new cap is fitted, the guide actually tells us to test the pedal to make sure that it's working, which mine is. So then we can move on to the next step. One part of a side note is that I don't know if this is if you're going to be able to see this here, but the cap itself protrudes a little bit higher, or just on parity with the actual flat part of our pot, which means that it's going to be butted right up against the case. So I'm going to make sure that when I rebuild this pedal, that if I took out any spacers or washers, I'm going to put them back in, and if I didn't, I'm actually going to put some in to make sure that, that this doesn't hit the top of the enclosure. Next on the cards, we're going to change the 33k resistor here on the top side of this IC next to D3. I think it's R16, but can't confirm that. I'll take it off and have a look. Now this is changed for a 33k resistor. I don't actually have any cool boutique, quote unquote, or vintage 33k resistors to hand. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the one that was sent with the pedal. So that 33k resistor has now been changed. Let me straighten that up while we're talking. Has now been changed. It does say to go ahead and test the pedal now. I'm not going to do that, mainly because I've got to pick my daughter up from school in approximately 25 minutes and I want to get this done beforehand. Moving on. The next mod is to remove C6, which is located here, and replace it with nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Coming to the end now, and the next mod is to remove this trim pot right here and replace it with this pot that we're going to mount externally. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that and then replace it. It does actually say on the guide which wires or which lugs of the pot go where with regards to the PCB. So when you buy this mod, which I'm sure you're all going to rush out and buy this mod, you'll be able to see how it's orientated. That's the final pot now replaced. On a side note, the board that I've got is different from the board on the tutorial. So looking at it, the trim pot is orientated 90 degrees out on this board, and it was a different trim pot. So as we're looking at these trim pots, you can see that one side will have two legs and the other side will have one leg. That is the wiper. The single leg on this version is the one that's most inboard. So if you imagine these are the outboards, I'm talking in chip terms again, as I ever do, apologies. But if you imagine these are the outboards, the leg that's most inboard is the center wiper of your pot. So it attaches to the very center of your pot. And then the other two, you know, if you wire it backwards, does it really matter if when you turn it down, the amplitude gets more? Not really. But the main thing is getting that center wiper, because on the 5 cats pedals, 9 cats, I'm adding 4 cats, sorry mate. On the 5 cats pedals drawing, the wiper is at the top, when really on this one, it's on the inboard side. Apart from that, sounds good. On a side note, if anyone's interested, this is how the pedal looks. I went with these Bakelite knobs and some smaller style knobs just because we're close to the foot switch. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's aged gold, and yeah, let me know what you think in the comments of my refinish of this pedal. Man, that was a fiddly one, but now it's dialed in and ready to go. Let's hear how it sounds. This cheap fuzz becomes absolutely absurd after a few tweaks. I nearly didn't want to give it away. It was full of octave-laden chaos. Let me know in the comments what you think of this mod. If you've got one of these fuzzers, then you probably think it sounds terrible. However, these simple mods can change all of that. I've seen them discussed much on forums. I've also seen some videos of people with the recorded results, but I've yet to see a step-by-step guide on how to complete it. So I thought I'd give it a go. And also, we'll do it in the Hello Sailor style. I have refinished my enclosure. For all of those of you waiting for me to do an enclosure refinishing video, I'm just in a process of moving workshop. Once I've moved, I will crack on with that. So, first thing, this is all the components I'm going to use. I will discuss each one of them as we go through. We'll do each mod one at a time. A couple of them are changing caps around with each other. However, I think if we're going to go through the trouble of taking the caps out of the circuit, I might as well just put something a little bit more boutique in there. Flame me in the comments as ever for using tropical fish caps in a cheap Chinese pedal. Love it. Now, before I start, and I do this with a lot of Joyo pedals, I'm not sure I've shown this before, but I'm going to take some tape. You can take something more aggressive than this painter's tape. But trust me when I say that these things are a pain in the backside. I'm just going to tape them down. You know, they do work loose and you do have to resolder them sometimes. Sometimes I replace the whole cables, but just for now, that's what we're going to use. We've also got some nice Sprague tantalum capacitors. These are used a lot in military circuits, especially for, you know, PCB type circuits. They're all over Type 23 frigates, they are. And then we've got some various Russian diodes and some other diodes, and of course our double pole double throw switch. I always seem to mess up the name of them, call them 3-pole double throw or whatever, single pole. There's a recent discussion on Instagram when I made myself look like a right because I called it the wrong thing probably about 5 times, when in fact I got it right in the first instance. So get on that one. Anyway, the first mod we are going to do is, let's get that out of the way, is these two capacitors here, which is C16 and C9, are actually in the wrong way round. So we've got our negative pointing up on this one, and on this one here we've got the negative on this inboard edge. There I go again with the naval terminology, whatever. So on this inboard edge, and we've got to swap them over. Now I'm going to use Sprague tantalum caps. Now I have said this in the past, handily these have a plus on the side that is positive, but if you can't see that, or you don't have a plus, the side that has, see if I can get it in focus, that bulge right there, that is the positive, and the side that is as such doesn't have the bulge, it's just flat and goes straight in, that is the negative. I've messed them up in the past, and if you use it in a power function, the cap goes pop. So I'm going to take these two caps out in a usual method, which I'm sure you've all watched my previous videos. If not, I'm going to link them, or link one above now. That'll show you how to change over capacitors. I'm going to take them out, and I'm going to orientate these new caps in the opposite way round. Just one thing to note while we're doing this, after removing the cap, we can clearly see that they've got the earth pointing up on the PCB. So I'm not sure if there's a story there behind them copying, I think it's a Fox tone machine, Fuzz. I don't know if maybe they've copied it wrong or whatever, but there you go. There we have our two 10 UF caps fitted. I'm fitting them to this side of the board because there's more space on this side. When you open the back as well, you get to see the parts that have been changed. I know some people don't really care about that sort of thing, but I really do. Now I'm going to move on to the 100 NF cap that we're going to change, in which I'm going to use this one. Now this is actually a 91 NF cap, so it's not quite 100 NF, but it is a vintage Philips tropical fish cap, Philips Mullard, whatever, British brand from back in the day. I know it's original because I've got all the original packaging, and I want to use this, so I'm going to drop, 9 NF. So sue me. Yeah. Right, anyway. So as we're looking at it, we're going to come to this capacitor right here. Okay. Now, what people tell you is that you're supposed to swap this capacitor with this capacitor here. But for me, if you're going to take them out, you might as well just put something good in its place. They're not really that expensive. And, it seems to annoy some people as well, which is a bonus. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this cap, do a bit of manipulating on the legs, so then I can get this size cap into that size space. That's our tropical fish cap 100 NF now fitted. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the 47 NF, which I recently received this week from my friend Blind John, who makes some of the best guitars you'll find. If you haven't heard of him, please go and do a search of him now. And also, he sent me some stickers. I haven't got them to hand. They're literally the coolest artwork you've ever seen. Anyway, Blind John, cheers for these caps. That I'm already putting them in pedals. Get on. What happens when you add too much heat to these vintage tropical fish caps? They just drop to bits. As soon as the outer layer cracks, you've lost it. So, another top tip from Joe coming. Well ahead of time, before you start building your pedal, it's best to get some glue. I like to use this super glue stuff. You can use anything. I've used epoxy resin before. And just get a very, very tiny bit of it, preferably before you start building and using the caps, and just put it over the edges. So over these side pieces here, just put like a little dab of glue on there. Doesn't have to be a lot. And what that does is stop the edges from cracking. Because as soon as they start cracking, they start disintegrating. And sometimes you may not notice it until it's in the pedal, or maybe you don't notice it at all and it fails sometime in the future. The final modification we're going to do, which isn't on all the forums, or at least not the ones that I've been reading, is these two diodes here, germanium diodes. They're labelled up as D4 and D5 on my unit. They're for clipping, so I'm going to take them out and I'm going to mount them on a switch. Now, I'm going to try and remove these and keep them intact so I can measure them and test them against my Soviet-made germanium diodes and see whether we're in the same ballpark. I'm assuming we're going to be. But you could just clip them out if you want. And I know people hate me saying that because, you're meant to desolder braid, clean up the pad and all that jazz. fine. But for me, you could just clip them out and solder straight to the pad, and I've done with it. That's our diodes now removed. You're only going to need to solder to one diode location, so one wire at this end and one wire at this end, and that's because these diodes are actually linked together on the board. So we don't really need to add that in because they're going to be linked together on our switch. So what we're going to do is we're going to run one wire from here and one wire from here, and they're going to go to our switch, to the two center lugs here, and then our diodes are going to go germanium one side and silicon the other side, facing opposite directions. Now if you want to see an in-depth, probably boring take on sine waves and clipping and stuff, I did it as ever in my TS808 modification video, the Tube Screamer mod video for beginners, where I get paper out and start drawing some stuff and go off on a massive tangent. I find it quite interesting, so I explain forward voltage and how to test it and stuff. I'm not going to do that here. All I will do is I will test our germanium diode that's come out of the Joyo pedal, which I did manage to remove without damaging, well, at least one of them, against our against our germanium Russian diodes, or Russian Soviet diodes. Apologies to my Russian friends, I know you're not Soviet. Well, most. Anywho, so I'm going to test them now and we'll make sure that we're in the same ballpark. We're going to go with our black lead on the negative and red lead on a positive, whichever way you want to call that, anode, whatever. And we can see that we have 0.268269 volts on our Soviet made diode, and on the diode that was in there we've got 0.343. So actually our Soviet diodes have got less voltage output, which are going to make them more fuzzy, softer, rounder, squidgy, insert tone words here. Now if we were to contrast that against our silicon diodes, we're going to get 0.53 volts, or 536 to be exact. I'm rising on these ones, so these are going to be less squidgy, less compressed, less round, and all of that jazz. But our switch has actually got 3 positions. So in the center position we've got no diodes, which is going to be high headroom. I think on some pedals they call it the glass setting, so it's high headroom, you know, there's nothing clipping the signal, or the diodes aren't clipping the signal. Another way we're going to have silicon, which is some clipping. It's going to be more brash, harder edged. And then we're going to have our germanium setting, which is much like what was in here anyway, which is rounder, softer, and all of that jazz. I think this is a nice addition, and definitely worthy doing, especially as it's the price of a switch and 4 diodes. Like an absolute legend, I seem to have misplaced my my cap that I normally put my switches in for when I'm soldering to them, so I'll just use the enclosure. If you're careful and don't drop any solder anywhere, there shouldn't be a problem. And as one of my customers recently said for a modification they were doing, and if they do damage the enclosure, it's now just relicked. Anyway, for this, to join the diodes together, I've seen people twist them, I've seen people, you know, solder them in separately, all of this jazz. All I like to do is just clean the ends, and then on the 2 diodes we're going to use, which is going to be, let's move that out of the way, which is going to be these 2 silicon ones. Now you could have a set of them handy arms, I have got them there, that like kind of hold components for you while you're working, but that would be well too easy for me, and as we know, I like to do things the hard way every single time. So all I'm going to do is ensure that the diodes are facing opposite directions, because I don't want to put them in the same way, because that'll sound not as good. Actually, that's a lie. Sound not as good. It may sound good to you, it's all subjective. But what I'm going to do now is bend the legs, ready to fit into the switch, and I'm just going to lie it on top of the other diode like this. Now this is really vulgar and uncouth, so apologies to all them electrical engineers who are watching this going, Joe, what the hell are you doing? Stop teaching people this rubbish. But this is how I do it. And then I tell you what, on a warship at sea, while the ship's rolling around, this is a pain in the arse. But anyway, for here, and then I just give it a little dab on each side. Once you've got one side soldered properly, you can go back and tidy up the other side. And you know what, I also know you're not meant to blow a solder joint after you've soldered it. I learned this watching that pedal show Amplifier Build, when they go to rift amps, and he says don't blow your solder joint fine, but it's a reaction. I just can't help myself. Now when you should have something like this once you've done it, and you just clip these outside legs off, and we have our perfect thing to then slot into our switch. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the Soviet made diodes too, and then I'm going to fit them onto our switch. This week I had an absolutely amazing compliment. I mean, I've had a few compliments about my work before, but not really my videos and the style that I do my videos. So one of my long-time customers, Alex, I won't say his full name in case he doesn't want me to, he started doing a few kits and modifications to existing pedals and stuff. Like he changed transistors in a different brand, Fuzz, that we were talking about. He did a great job on that. And then he actually said he's going to build his own pedal from parts, from scratch. And it was my videos that give him the boost to be able to do it, because he was like concerned that he weren't doing things properly. And then there's me saying, here's the proper way to do it, but I don't do it that way. I wing it like this type thing. Give him the confidence to actually go ahead and take the plunge, which is fantastic, because, you know, inspiring people to have a crack at this is amazing. And if there is anyone out there who's building the first couple of pedals or just getting into it, and you have any sort of question or anything, you just want to talk pedals, talk components, please get in touch, and I'll always answer any questions. Or, you know, even if it's just to tell me that you think I'm doing something wrong, or you found a different way, or there's a better component to use, anything, I'm more than happy to engage in all of that, and I'm happy to offer any information that I have, you know, for whatever that's worth. Is that the best switch you've ever seen in your life? Maybe not, but it does look bloody good with them Soviet made diodes on there. They're beauties there. Right, so we've got our Soviet made diodes one end, our silicon diodes the other side. You could use 4148 or anything regular like that. I just use these power diodes, the 1N4007s, just because we've got them in stock and they're quite good. I've drilled an extra hole in this enclosure up here at the top to fit this in. I mean, you can fit it wherever you like, but I'm going to go there. Now the key to this is you want to drill your hole higher or on level to all of these holes for the jacks and power socket, because then you know that it's not going to foul the board, because obviously the jacks and power socket sit on top of the board. It does look I've drilled this pretty damn close, but I think it's going to fit. So right, next is going to be where these diodes were, the aforementioned wire that I was going on about, one this side and one that side, coming from this diode pair. I'm going to run a length of it out. It doesn't matter which end attaches to which, because we're going symmetrical clipping on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and attach wires. I'm going to attach them from this side because it's going to lift off the board that way, and attach to the switch, which will be sat just up here. Another thing of note on this board is that the holes, the through holes on the PCB are absolutely tiny, which is a pain in the arse to work with. So as I've shown before, our little wire technique of clipping half the wires off, I got quite a bit of stick actually from various people about clipping some wire out and saying about capacitance, and you know, you're changing the capacitance of the wire if you're, you know, clipping the end bit out. And on some military equipment, especially sensors, the wire capacitance really comes into play. But in this sort of pedal, that's absolute rubbish. Because look at this. I mean, there's a component leg cut off. The signal goes through that. That is thick as you like and massive and made of a different material. Compared to this, which is also in there. And there's also thinner components as well. So in this sort of thing, no. In a military sensor for the weapon system or the flooding system, yeah, absolutely. And I have made the mistake before now of going and fitting a new flood sensor. Really hard to get to. You run all the cable out. You fit the sensor, you finally get a soldering iron down into position, which is a pain in the arse, by the way, because nothing on a ship's ever ergonomically designed, so there's no power supply local, all of that jazz. You finally fit it, and like an idiot when I was a young lad, I'd cut the cable short to make it nice and neat. Well, of course, the cable capacitance comes into play, and that sensor didn't work, so I trashed the whole system. Get on. While I'm going off on these tangents, I might as well say, I'm making myself sound like a terrible engineer on board. Broken sensor systems and stuff, but put into context, that was really early on in my career, and they say it takes like 1,000 hours to become proficient at something. Well, I had like 22 years of working on chips for long periods away and stuff to hone my skill set in. So I'm not as terrible as I make myself out to sound or demonstrating these pedals. Here we have our switch now wired in. I've just put a bit of heat shrink over it as ever to make it look a bit neater. So let's recap the mod. First of all, we changed both of these 10 UF caps. We switched them around so then the earths were pointing in the opposite direction, or the negative was pointing in the opposite direction, because Joyo got that wrong when they were making the pedal, when they were designing the pedal. They copied that wrong. Also, these two caps were the wrong way round. So we needed 100 NF on this side and a 47 NF on this side. If you don't want to buy caps, you can just swap the caps that are in there around like the internet tells us to do. However, I like the idea of putting tropical fish caps in there. Why not? And then lastly, but not leastly, because it makes the most difference to the sound, is I've changed the clipping diodes. I really like it in the center position with no clipping diodes. I tend to favour that in basically every pedal, including the tube screamer and things like that. I'm going to be doing another tube screamer video if anyone's interested. I'm redoing my vintage overdrive video, and I'm also going to be going in a bit more detail with that one anyway. And that will also become a live stream. Myself and John are going to break down a circuit and talk about each part and stuff like we did with the Fuzz face. Right, so I'm going to get this. Actually, before I do that, at this point, I highly advise if you're building this yourself or modifying this yourself, that you test it now. Just plug it in, it should work, and see whether it works before you get it in an enclosure and then have to pull it out and start again. I am, however, going to save the test on this video until after I've put it back in the enclosure. So there we have it, Voodoo Fuzz, fully modified and ready to go. Now, I went with these knobs just because I think they really look good on this enclosure. I know normally I do like a knob shootout, if you will, but this time I just had to go with these. Here's our extra switch on the back. It's a mini toggle for our clipping, which is up here. So we've got our clipping diodes here, our two caps, normal caps, and our two that were electrolytic caps. So 10 UF and a 47 and a 100 NF. We're ready to go. You'll notice that I've clipped out the battery lead, because who runs pedals with batteries? Come on. That's the mod done. The Fuzz is now officially unhinged. Time to plug it in and see what it sounds like. But before we do that, if you're interested in these pedals or any other pedals, please head to hellosailoreffects.com and check out my personal builds where they're available for purchase, and every purchase really helps support this show. Thank you. When I was starting out, I didn't have the money to buy these expensive boutique pedals, so I started modding Joyo ones. I couldn't believe how good they sound, especially for the price. They're a perfect platform for adding all of these mods. It's like I found a buried treasure chest of tone. Can a cheap Joyo pedal sound like a £500 Tube Screamer TS10? Watch as I mod one into John Mayer's favourite overdrive without breaking the bank. Hello people, Joe from Hello Sailor Effects here. Welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm taking a Joyo vintage overdrive and turning it into a Tube Screamer TS10. Don't worry if you can't afford the let me say that again, £500 price tag for the TS10 these days. I'm going to change a standard £30 Joyo vintage overdrive into that very pedal. I'm going to be using all the skills that I've collected over the last 15 years of building effects pedals, most of which has been at sea, on warships in the Royal Navy. Stay around to the end and you'll get to hear the unmodified version against my beast. So this is everything we're going to need for the John Mayer TS10 mod to our Joyo vintage overdrive. The reason I'm doing this is because I really want a TS10, but I haven't got the money to pay £500 for one. And so the next best thing is to change a cheap Chinese overdrive into an expensive boutique, quote unquote boutique vintage overdrive. So we have here our A4 bit of paper with all of our component list on. If anyone wants this component list or this a copy of this, please write in the comments and I shall get one to you. Parts that we have are a 330 NF capacitor, an 18 NF capacitor for C4 and C5. C10 will be switched, so it's going to go between a 22 NF, a 47 NF and a 100 UF. To be noted, I believe that the Mayer version is a 22 NF, so should you want to build just straight John Mayer TS10, the Mayer version, a TS10, I think it's just straight 22 NF. We also have a 220 ohm resistor for RA. Now we'll get to RA when we come there, because it's an addition, it's not actually on the board as we speak. Then we have R4, which is a 2.2k, and then R9, which is a 1.5k, but I don't have a 1.5k, so I've got a 1.1 Dale resistor, which is a rather nice one, and then I've got an old flame-proof 390 ohm resistor. Put them two together and you get 1.49k, and you know what's a small number between friends. I'm sure, as I say, it's close enough for government work. Lastly but not leastly, nothing to do with the TS10, because I'm not even sure what diodes that come with the TS10, but I do have one set of MA150 vintage Japanese diodes left, and I figured if I'm going to do a pedal mod, I might as well put them in here. I'm not going to put them switchable, they're just going as a straight replacement for the 4148s that are down there in D1 and D2. I'm going to go ahead and remove C11 and C10 because they're next to each other, and want to remove them. It's quite easy to remove them both together. Then I'm also going to remove D1 and D2 because they're again in the same area. It'll be nice and easy to remove them. That is C11 and C10 on my drawing now removed. Next, I'm just going to clip out the battery snap because we're not going to have space for a battery, just because my switch is going to take up the room there. So we're going to have a fat switch or EQ switch coming off C10. Now C10, first of all, I'm going to add in two wires and I'm going to run them down here and they will attach to our switch. That's going to be the first thing. Thank you for watching thus far. But if you're like me, you're probably wondering, how many different pedals can Joe mod the vintage overdrive into before he gets bored? Well, the answer is roundabout now I'm pretty bored. So I would like you to come up with some ideas for me on what pedals you'd like me to mod, or what specific mods you'd like me to try out for this channel. Please write them in the comments. So our wires now in place for C10. I've put a little bit of heat shrink around it just to keep them together, and I'll run them along here and they'll go to our switch. Now, one thing I did forget was to tape off this terrible ribbon strip, and the glue that was meant to be holding it on just popped off because that's useless. So I'm going to tape that off now so that then it doesn't work itself loose while I'm trying to work on the pedal. These really are the worst ribbon connectors in the world. Everything else on this pedal is actually not too bad considering the price tag, but that ribbon connector is horrific. Anyway, next we're going to go on to C2. Well, actually, this is another point. So on the Joyo board, it's labelled as C2, but I've called it C11, partly because I found this schematic or this picture online with all of the labels on, but they also correspond to the tube screamer. So we're going to go with tube screamer values, which is C11. That's this one UF cap. Now, this is the interesting bit. Well, this is the bit that I find interesting. This one UF cap is on the input to our first op-amp stage. On the TS10, in series with this cap, there is a 220 ohm resistor, which is why I've called it RA. as in the first resistor, because I couldn't call it 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, because it's not part of the circuit. Anyway, so we're going to take this, I'm going to wire them two together, and I'm going to put them in. But now the problem is, what I don't want to do is have resistor, then capacitor, then op amp, because that's not how it is in a circuit. It's capacitor, resistor, op amp. So normally the best way to do it would be to get the correct pin on the op amp, look at the schematic, that would take 5 seconds, and then test continuity between that pin and our pad over here. However, because I don't have my multimeter with me, which is fantastic, forgetting that thing, of all the things to forget, at least I remember my soldering iron, but because I don't have that with me, I'm going to have to go ahead and just look at the board a little bit. Now, I can see that the bottom pad of this, of C11, C2 on this board, but C11, now I can see that the bottom pad of this is here, and it comes down and attaches here. That means that the top pad, where we can see a line coming off and coming this way, must go to the op amp. So I'm going to put my resistor at the top here and my capacitor at the bottom here. Now the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to bend one of these legs down, and that is going to go into this hole here. And then I'm going to clip one of these legs short, and that's going to go into the other hole. And then the legs that's sticking up on this and sticking up on that, and just going to join together. Nice and easy, no messing about, no heat shrink because it's not going to foul anything. And that's the way I'm going to do it. Well, that's the way I say I'm going to do it. But there we have it, our 220 ohm resistor and 1 UF cap in series, now in situ. Next is going to be C4 at the back here, and we're going to change that for a 330 NF cap, which is this orange drop cap that I got from my mate Teddy Plant. Cheers, Teddy. Now, the idea with this one is it's not going to fit anywhere in here. There's just not enough space for it. So I'm going to flip the board over, and I'm going to lie it on its side, and I'm going to fit it on the back there. So if anyone takes the back off the pedal, you should be able to see it too. Here is C4 now changed. Next, I'm going to move down to C5, which is located on the board here, next to these 3 resistors here, C5, and that's going to be changed out for the 18 NF. Now, if you haven't got an 18 NF, it's quite a obscure value capacitor. If you haven't got an 18 NF, I'm sure you won't notice any difference whatsoever between that and a 22 NF. Just saying. There we have C5 now changed. Next, I'm going to wire up my switch. I've got a double pole, double throw switch. It is an on, off, on switch that gives us 3 positions. I like these shorter lever ones, but you can get the longer lever ones. And the way we're going to wire it up is we're going to have our 22 NF in the middle. So in the middle position, we have just our TS10 setting. Up to one side, we're going to have 100 NF, and that will give us 120 NF or 122 NF when selected on that side. And then when we go the other way, we'll have a 47 NF, and it will be the 47, take it up to 69 NF, because we add the 22 on top of it, because it'll be both of them in parallel. Right. I'm going to go ahead and wire it up, but what I am going to do, instead of trying to wire these 2 wires in situ, I'm going to cut them about that long, and I'm going to wire them to the center lugs along with the 22 NF capacitor, and then I'll wire in the 2 outside ones just because it gives me space to do some. Our switch is now wired up, 100 NF, 22 NF, 47 NF. That gives us 3 positions for our fat switch. Next, I'm going to move on to our resistors. First resistor today is R4, which is over here, 2.2K. That is not over here, that's the label of what resistor we're going to do. R4 is over here. So this bottom side here, there is a bank of resistors, and it's the second one in from the inboard side. So right here, second one in. I'm going to go ahead and remove that now, and then we'll replace it with this 2.2K. That's R4 now fitted and in place. I'm going to move on to R9, which is situated over here. Let's See, R9 is here. So there's a bank of 3 resistors, and of course it's the one bang in the middle to make it more difficult to change. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the old resistor, and then I'm going to, on the back of the board, I'm going to tie these two together, as I always do. I call it the helicopter style, just because I wind them together, whatever. I'm going to do that and then lie them flat and attach the other end into the pads, and then that should be our last component change then. There's our final resistor R9 in place, and of course I was wrong. We are still changing one other component, and it is of course the diodes that we've already removed. Completely forgot about them. So next I'm going to fit these MA150 diodes, one going in one direction, one going in the opposite direction for symmetrical clipping. Here's all of our components now on the board. We have our switch wired up, our MA150 diodes in place. I'm going to remove this tape and then fit it back in the enclosure. And there we have it, the Meyer TS10. I went for these Neve style knobs. They are bakelite. I really like them. They fit in with this pedal well, and they don't obscure John's good looking face there. Cheers. And that's it. We have a fat switch on the side. Middle position is the TS10 setting. MA150 diodes inside, and a whole host of other boutique and quote-unquote mojo components that people seem to hate me putting in these pedals. Get on. That's today's build now complete. You've seen how I make a vintage overdrive into, of course, the John Mayer TS10. Now onto the sound sample. First you're going to hear the unmodified version, and then you're going to hear the TS10 with its 3 positions of tone. At this point, I'd really like to ask if you could write in a comment and let me know if you've tried this mod out for yourself, or if you intend to try it yourself, and what type of tube screamer you're going to mod into a TS10. And now for the finale. I saved the best till last. This is of course my recent Fox tone machine from a Joyo Voodoo Octave Fuzz mod. Stick around to the end of this one and you'll get to see another secret little mod that'll surprise you. There's been a ton of interest in my video on the Voodoo Octave, and I actually messed up 2 of the caps in my original video. Someone was kind enough to point that out, so I thought maybe it's time that I revisited this thing, and let's see if I can't do something a bit more interesting. I mean, I've learned quite a bit since then, so maybe I can bring a bit more to the party. First things first, I'm going to get this all stripped down, and I've got to refinish this enclosure, because come on, I mean, it's not exactly the best looking pedal, is it? This is the Joyo Voodoo Octave, and to be honest, stock, it sounds kind of thin, but for $40 you really can't complain. I'm going to be showing you some mods that unlock this circuit's potential. I mean, after all, it's based off the Fox tone machine, which is nasty, brutal, and an awesome vintage fuzz. So can we bring out the Fox tone machine character out of this cheap $40 pedal? Well, I think we can. And here we have our new enclosure. Well, the same enclosure, just painted. I've gone with a wolf style artwork, seems as this is going to become sort of similar to the Fox tone machine. It's the closest artwork I could get to a fox. We've gone with neon yellow and metallic blue for the burst. I haven't really aged it as such, just because I've done a lot of aged pedals lately and I just feel like not today. You'll notice I've drilled 2 extra holes here. What could they be for? Stick around to the end and you're going to find out what exactly I'm going to be switching with this circuit. I mean, I'm sure you could guess, but If you are going to guess, write your guesses into the comments section and see who gets it right. So what do we think of our new enclosure compared to the green ram's head thing that was there before? Now on to the mods. So some of this is going to be playing by ear. I'm not exactly 100% sure I'm going to do all the mods exactly as I say now. We're just going to go through and have a crack at it. First things first, we have C15 and C9. Now these are polar caps, so they have a positive and a negative, and they are in the wrong way round. Great. Normally what you could do is just take them out, flip them over and put them back in if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that because I've got these. These are non-polar caps. They're 10 microfarads, 10 UF, which is the same values that's in there. They're just bigger. I'm going to fit them in, probably on the opposite sides of the board, but I'll be fitting them in anyway. What else are we going to do? Over here, we have C16. This is our output cap. This is also a 10 UF, 10 microfarad. It's massive. The idea with this being so big is just to let every signal travel through the pedal, i.e. not to do any tone shaping whatsoever. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change it up. This one is going to get taken out, and I'm going to run some wires down to the front end of the pedal, and I'm going to mount one of these 470 NF tropical fish caps. Why? Because I love them. Why am I dropping it to 470 NF? That's going to shape the signal to not be quite as full range, if that makes sense, so not quite as fat. It's going to be a little bit more focused. And you may think, why are you doing that, Joe? It's going to make next to no difference, I don't think. Not whatsoever. And I really don't like having electrolytic caps in the signal chain. It's not for me. I know the Fuzz face does it, but I really don't like it, so I'm getting rid of it for one of them. Now also a mistake on this, and I don't know whether it was a mistake or whether Joyo actually modified the Fox tone machine to try and get this sort of thing. But over here we've got a 100 NF cap, so a 0.1 microfarad, and over here we have a 47 NF, so a 0.047 microfarad. Now these are in the wrong way round. In the Fox tone machine, that's the 47 NF and that's the 100 NF, but they're the wrong way round in this pedal. Great, whatever. So I'm going to take them out and I'm going to fit this 47 NF in the 47 NF position for the Fox tone machine, and I'm going to fit this 100 NF in the 100 NF position. Another mod on this thing here, we have this switch. This switch takes us, basically it's a mid cut or a mid boost if you like, or whatever, and all it's doing is swapping between this low cap here and I think maybe a 47 NF cap or maybe even a 100 NF cap, not sure. But the lower side or the higher range side of that switch is this 1 NF cap here. Now in a Fox tone machine, that's a 3.3 NF cap. So already we're well below that, which is probably why you're getting a little bit of a weedy sound out of the pedal in that position. So I'm going to do away with that, and I'm actually going to replace it for this. It's an old Erie 4.7 NF cap. So that's like an extra 1 and a bit NF more than a Fox tone machine. So it'll sound fatter in all positions. Great. I'm doing that. And then our switches. I'll give you the clue on the first switch because I did it in the last video. I mean, the last video will be much less comprehensive than this one because I filmed it when I was just starting out. But the last video, I took the 2 diodes out over here. These are our clip-in diodes. I took them out and put them on a switch and changed them up with some germaniums. I'm going to do that again, which is why I've got this switch. It is a 3-position switch. So in the center position, we're going to have no diode clipping. So it's just going to be really boosty and it's going to give it a massive volume hump. One side is going to be germanium, and then the other side is either going to be the exact same, 1N4, 148 diodes, or I'm going to swap them out for something else. I haven't quite decided yet. I'd like you to write in the comments what you would do if you were doing this. Would you put LEDs in there, or would you put something maybe, I don't know, maybe like a power diode, like one of these 1N4007s or something like that? I'm torn. But I feel like if I put them on the switch, it will mean that you can always have the original position in it if that's what you want. And to be fair, these diodes actually, if they weren't so cheap and readily available and used in everything, people would be searching after them because they genuinely sound good. So maybe I will put them in there and we'll search out something nice and germanium for the other side. And then finally onto the last switch. This is a 4-pole double throw. So it's an on switch. There's only 2 positions. There are 4 poles. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I'm going to wait until the end to do this mod. So I want you all to take 5 seconds now. Stop what you're doing. Write a comment in the comment section and tell me what you think I'm going to be switching with this. And stick around to the end and see if you're right. If you want to own this exact pedal, you'll be able to find it over on HelloSailorFX.com with some of my more boutique tagboard builds too. Thank you for buying pedals from me. It really does help keep this dream alive. Before we get into the very first mod, what you should do with all of these Joyo pedals is tape off the wires. Now these wires here, before you start messing about with it, it's better just to add some tape there because these connections are absolutely rubbish. The amount of times that I've been working on these things and had to resolder them, it's ridiculous, truly ridiculous. And also, before I go any further, I know some people are going to hate this, but I have to do it. No one uses a battery on a fuzz pedal unless it's reverse polarity. Grow up. I take that off because it gives us the space to add in the larger cap anyway, so I did need the space. And also, on the actual stomp switches themselves, you're much better to, because the glue that they put on, just it's there for show. It does literally nothing. You're better taping this off anyway. You can thank me later because when one of them wires inadvertently comes out, which it will, you'll end up chasing your tail for bloody ages. Okay, so the first mod we're going to do is actually the 2 caps that are in the wrong way round. Now, all you'll have to do to take these out is wet the tip, locate them on the back of the board, which is here, put your soldering iron on and put pressure on the cap until the leg moves. And then likewise go the other direction, put pressure on the cap until the leg moves. And it will come through. Now you have to be careful doing this because you could actually damage the board. I know before someone tells me. I completely get that. And using the solder sucker or solder pump, whatever, desolder pump, is definitely the right way to do it. I just don't do it that way. I know I'm going to get hate in the comments, but that just seems a lot easier to me. To replace them, we're going to be replacing them with these, or non-polar caps. No other reason than it's just easier than having to think about the positive and the negative. You could flip them round if you want. That's completely up to you. I'm going to be lying these non-polar caps down or on their side, pointing towards the jacks. Why am I doing that? Well, we're using this space up here, this end of the pedal for our switches, so don't want to get in the way of that. So what I will do is I'll use my flat nose snips to measure how far I'm going to go along before I bend them down, so then they're both the same length, if you like. And then just after the flat bit of the cap, I'm going to snip them. And then I'm going to snip one so it's slightly longer than the other. That's because we're going to push the longer one through first until it goes through by simply just, let's get a bit of solder on the end of our iron. Hold it up against the pad. Heat the pad up and then gently just push it through the hole. Done. Oh, I was just about to say as easy as that, but can anyone else spot what I've done? I've actually done the cap pointing towards where our switches are going to go. So that's a massive no-no. Well done, Joe, you absolute idiot. Let's flip that round so I don't do it again. Right, we want to go this way round. So then our cap is actually away from where our switches are going to go. It's the whole bloody point of shaping the cap in the first place. Oh, well done, Joe. It's been a long week. My daughter seems to be getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning again. Just ready for war, basically. I don't know what's going on. She's like ready to face the world at 4. It's killing me. Not as much as it's killing my wife, though, because she actually gets up with her. Right. Let's get the second leg in there. There's one of our caps in place. Now, the next one. Last time, this is what spared this video, by the way. Last time, I built this pedal. It ended up going to my friend Stefan, who runs Guitar Pedal X. He did an awesome review on it. Absolutely fantastic. But I think last time, I switched over this cap, the output cap, instead of this one. And no one noticed. I didn't even notice. And then just recently, someone commented on the video and said, by the way, I think you swapped the wrong cap round. And I did. So I had to refilm it. I had to make this new video just because I can't leave things like that. So But to be fair, Stefan really liked the sound of the pedal. So, you know, was it wrong or was it just, you know, not what I intended? So either way, this time I'm getting the damn right caps, right? Look at the size of this damn solder tip. I always do it. I switch my solder tip to do tag board and stuff, and then change my mind and end up doing some Veroboard or some PCBs in this case. Perfect. Right, now there's lots of space here to fit this cap in the same manner. That's the beauty about having these Nipex snips. You can just space out the bend and then bend them over, and you know that both my caps are going to be the same spacing because I've used these snips. And if you want a set of these snips or flat nose pliers, apologies, or a set of these matching snips, Nipex are the best. Thank you, Marcus Reeves, for suggesting them. It would be amazing if you could buy them through the affiliates link in my description, because I get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon. There's no extra charge to yourself. It's win-win. And I get to use the money to buy more snips and stuff and try out new gear for then you to decide whether you want to buy it yourself. Right. So we snip them both together, and then we just choose one of the legs. Doesn't really matter which one. Snip a little bit extra off that one so that then we can push one cap leg in first and then the other one in second. If you have them both the same length, you'd end up trying to heat two solder pads up at the same time. It's just not going to happen. You end up joining them together with solder, and it's a whole world of mess to try and sort that out. Right, that's not actually going through there, so see if we can get a bit of solder on there and make it happen. There we go. You can kind of feel the wire sink through the solder pad when it's going through. Now this one, well, that was easy. And I'll tidy them both up. You don't need loads of solder on these, but inadvertently I'm used to soldering tag boards, so I end up putting bloody loads on. So there's our two caps now reversed. And also, now when someone takes the back off this pedal, they'll be able to see the mods that I've done. It's kind of good to show you working right, rather than having to take it out and flip it over where there's not that much space. Next up, we have these two caps here. So I got these mods completely off freestompboxes.org. Great website, and there's a thread on there. I think the guy's name was Ian something or another anyway, and he showed these mods first, not me, so I didn't trace this circuit. Now these caps, this one is a 47, needs to be 100. That one's 100, needs to be a 47. Brilliant. What we're going to do here is, I should use a solder sucker, I know, but I'm going to be a heathen about it, and I'm going to jab my screwdriver underneath here. Sounds right professional, doesn't it? Get in, Joe. I'll jab my screwdriver underneath here and lift the cap off while I'm heating up the solder pads on the bottom. So what we can see here, and this is how we're going to find the solder pads, we can see that we've got two resistors next to each other and then a cap just underneath that. So I'm expecting to see a row of three solder pads in line with each other underneath this pot, and then a row of two in line with each other, and then one reasonably close by. So flip it over, there's our pot, 1, 2, 3 for the pot, 3 in line with each other, and then 2 together and 1 right next to it. So these two here have to be our cap because they're at the bottom of the row of 3. So I know where I'm going there. Now, to get into this how I normally do it is a bit awkward because there's just not a lot of space around it. So if I hold it like that, see if I can heat up that and maybe jab it under. So that's lifted a little bit, which means that I can get my screwdriver under there more. And I know there's professional electrical engineers watching this now, like absolutely dying, going, what are you doing, Joe? But this is just what I've done in the past, and this is what I'm going to keep doing. I mean, I suppose best to explain that. Where it comes from, right, is I know I'm in my nice garage converted to a workshop right now, but on board a warship, to go and get the solder sucker or to go and get that equipment, it may be 5 decks away. And to get that itself, you get stopped by 5 people who go, oh, Chief, can you just look at this? Or, Chief, can you just do that? And by the time you actually get the solder sucker, it's maybe, you know, a long time has passed and the job's still not done. So the bit of kit's still broke, and that's no good. Whereas if you're in situ and you just whip a screwdriver out your pocket and you've got your portable soldering iron, I mean, you could say, why aren't you carrying your solder sucking in your pocket, in your overalls pocket? Fine, I could do, but at some point you've got to whittle down what's in your pockets so you can actually manoeuvre around the ship, you know. Otherwise it does get a bit ridiculous. So now there's one leg out, I can grab it with my flat nose pliers, and because I'm not trying to save this cap, well, it's literally fell apart. It doesn't matter if it falls apart because I don't want to keep it. So if you want to keep the cap, you're probably better using a solder sucker and being a bit more careful. But for me, I'm really not. I'm adding my own caps in. I feel like adding your own caps in is part of the fun, but if you haven't got caps, then, you know, what are you going to do? So C14 was our 100 NF. I did want to double check that, but yeah, there you go, 104. So 100 NF. 104 on your cap, by the way, is 100 NF. Now we can see where we're going to here, and our new cap is pretty massive. New old cap, actually, because it's an old one, but our new cap is pretty massive compared to the one that we're taking out. So we're going to lie it this way, but I'll do the same thing, and I'll just bend the legs over and lie it flat on top. So we'll give the legs a clean. And again, yes, I know I'm cleaning it with my snips, but believe me, these Nipex snips can take it. They don't go blunt very easily. So I'm going to use my flat nose pliers again, just to measure out where I'm going to bend the legs and stuff. So I'll bend this leg over because the spacing of this cap is much larger than the spacing here. So all I do now is I lie one leg over a hole. A hole? Well done, Joe. One leg over the hole there, so then that lines up. And then where this leg intersects the hole I want to go into, I just put my flat nose pliers there and give it a bend. And now the legs are the right spacing to go in where I want them to go. So I can just take my snips, bend the legs over so that then they are 90 degrees. And you're probably better using them one so you don't cut through the ends of them. I've just been doing it for so long that I just do it the way that I do it. One leg longer than the other as ever, because when we are slotting them in, it's just easier. It just is. And I don't know whether these legs are actually going to go through these holes. So if it doesn't, I'm going to have to solder to the pad, which is not ideal, but I do want to use this cap. So needs must. We'll wet the tip. And now the moment of truth, because the thing with Joyo is these pads are so small as the holes. Oh, it will go in. Look at that. If you work on something like a Boss PCB, and especially one of the older ones and not the SMD ones that they use now, it's really amazing to work on because the solder pads are so strong and so big that they're just like a joy to work on, whereas these Joyos, not so much. Although they're not the worst solder pads I've ever worked on, I've got to say, I can't even remember who was the worst, to be honest. But these definitely aren't. There we go. Now I'm just going to go ahead and tidy up them solder joints. They're kind of tack soldered in place there. It's not the best joint I've ever done in my life, I've got to say. But the cap's sitting off the board, because you don't want it lying on top of the board, obviously. Well, not that it would really make too much difference, but it's better to have it off the board a little bit. And there's 3 of our caps changed. Now we're on to our 100 NF. I'm just going to go ahead, and I've dropped a bit of solder there when I was removing the cap. I really don't want that to get in the way later on. So now our 100 NF is going to go in this position over here. Now I think that I could possibly fit that straight in because the leg spacing. So I may do that rather than having it on that side. But then again, I do like to know that the cap is visible when someone takes the back off so you can see what work I've done to the pedal. There's no secrets here, obviously. I'm making a video. I know some people goop their pedals or do all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff to try and hide the fact that they modified it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this 47 NF cap, get that out the way. But to get to it, I'm going to remove this 1 NF cap that we are indeed changing as well. So it makes sense to get that one out the way, and then I can work on this one, get it out the way, and then we can come back to that. Here's where a wise man learns from someone else's mistakes. So I fit this cap first, and it turns out that the 47 NF cap that I'm going to fit next is right underneath where I lay this one. Brilliant. Well done, Joe. So I've had to lift this out the way to be able to get these two caps out, the 1NF and the 47NF out. It does mean that I'm going to have to mount my 100NF in its place on the upper side of the board, just because otherwise it's not going to fit. So if we snip it so then our legs are fairly short and snip one slightly longer than the other, we can just probably fit these straight from the top down into the holes, just by, if I wet the tip, just by adding a little bit of solder to it. I know I could solder sucker these holes before anyone says it. In fact, I think that one might actually just go straight in. Let's have a look. There we are. Good. There's one leg in, and the next leg should just line up perfectly because it is the right space and cap for the right place, which almost never happens when I'm building, because I like to use all the stupid size vintage components and stuff. There's my 100NF cap fitted. Now let's get on to the last cap underneath. Well, the next cap underneath, which is C1. It's our 1NF cap. So I removed this bad boy, if I can ever get it. This tiny ceramic cap. It's a 100 cap. 100? Yeah. Anyway, there's a 1NF cap. We removed that, and I'm replacing it with a 4.7 NF cap, which is this one. This is made by Erie. It's an old one. I got these in a batch ages ago. They test okay. They sound okay. And to be fair, it's nice and small, so it's going to fit in here nicely. And I'm going to fit it standing up on the upper side of the board. Actually, that's probably a bad idea, isn't it? If I fit it on the upper side of the board standing up, it may, let's just see, it may foul the top. If I measure it there, I'm going to have to make it sit lower than that, or fit it inside it. Nah, I'm going to fit it on the underside. If I fit it on the top side, it's going to foul the enclosure. So that ain't happening. One leg's longer than the other. Let's bend them over. The legs on these are super thick, but the connections where they go into the body aren't like the most amazing. So just be wary of that while you're doing it. Now this goes in. So there's our 100 NF cap. That's where that goes in. Then there's a resistor. I think it's R3. Then there's this cap, and then a resistor. So let's just double check that. 100 NF cap, R3, this cap, and then another resistor. Yep, spot on. So we know where we're going. The question is, can we get there? Right, I'm going to use my flat nose pliers to hold it, because this is where I burn myself 50,000 times. And then I have a dilemma when I'm editing it, or whether to edit it out and stop myself looking like a tool or not. And inadvertently, I always leave it in. Now just a bit of manipulation to get the other leg to the line up. I know it would be a million times easier if I'd have just sucked the solder out of it and then I could just poke them straight through the holes. I get it. But I just do it this way. I feel like I'm justifying myself in this poorly, and I'm going to keep doing it all the way through the video. So there we go. Right, now a quick solder. Get some clean solder on there. So what have we done so far? We've switched out C9 and C15 for non-polar. We've changed C14 from a 100 NF cap to a 47 NF cap mounted under the board. We've changed C3 from a 47 NF to a 100 NF cap Of course, you can just swap them caps around if you wish. And we fitted that this side. C1, which is a 1 NF cap in this pedal, and a 3.3 NF cap in a Fox tone machine. Well, we've changed that for a 4.7 NF cap. And all that's going to mean is that in the mid-cut position on this switch, no, it's not the mid-cut position. What is it called? Let me have a look. So you've got normal and mid-cut, right? Okay. So one position is going to be fatter, and the second position is going to be thinner. The thinner position, instead of being 1 NF, is going to be 4.7 NF. And if anyone's ever built a Rangemaster or anything like that, that should make a healthy bit of difference. Now, next up, we're going to take out C16, and we're going to replace it with 2 wires. The wires are going to come out, and they're going to come right the way out to about, you know, that much longer than this. And I will mount the cap on the inside of this board, right up against this sponge here. I'll put some double-sided foam there. I'll mount the cap up against it. We'll use some steel reinforced epoxy. That can stay in there, and then we'll just join them wires to it. Simple enough. So let's get this cap out. I mean, you don't have to do this. You could leave this bit in. In fact, you don't have to do any of these mods. I would love to know if anyone has other mods that they've done to this Joyo pedal that made it sound good. I've seen someone do like a blend mod between the octave and the normal signal, like on a switch. So you switch the switch, it engages a pot, and that just blends between the octave part and the normal part. That would be fantastic. But to be honest, I couldn't be bothered drilling any more holes after I drilled the 2. Maybe I'll do another video in the future with that in. We are at the end going to be comparing this pedal to one of the original Joyo pedals, unmodified, just so we can get a right gauge on whether it makes much difference. So our wire, I'm just going to do 2 healthy lengths of wire. I'm not really going to measure it. As long as they're going to reach the cap, I'll be happy. I am going to heat shrink them. It's not going to matter which side attaches to which side of the cap, because the cap is non-polar. So I will just heat shrink these bad boys to keep them together. Part of me didn't want to redo this video because it's like, I've done it before, no one's going to be interested. But there seems to be a real resurgence in interest in that Joyo mod video. And I wasn't really the best at filming at that point, so I figured why not have a cracker doing the mod again and see if I can improve on it. I'd love to know whether people think that if I've improved on it or not, or whether I've just rehashed an old video. That'd be interesting. I'm sure there'll be someone on there telling me how wrong I am. I do like it when people tell me I'm wrong. Why wouldn't you go in there? I tell you what might be easier is I've got this massive long length of wire. I don't need that. I only need a tiny bit to get through the pad. That was indeed my battery dying on my camera. Cheers, camera. Let's solder both of these on the other side. Just give them a touch up. And snip off the excess. There's no need to leave that hanging about. There we are. Now, how much heat shrink do I need for this? You don't have to heat shrink this. I'm just putting it in there just to keep them together, because I'm going to be running a few other wires coming from this board for a few other mods. First of all, the diodes, and then our super special massive switch mod. It's not going to be that super special, to be fair, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Now, for the heat shrink, I am going to use a lighter. I know people get bent out of shape about it and tell me to use a proper heat gun. I have got one. My wife bought me a heat gun, but I'm so used to doing a lighter thing. Again, force a habit of being on board and not wanting to travel around the ship and try and find a power supply. Oh, God. Let me tell you, on board a ship, there is that much different power. So you'd have 115 AC, 240 AC, 440 AC. And it's just, you know, inadvertently you're working in the depth or the bowels of the ship, and there's never any power there. It's just a nightmare. So I'm not going to bother. I just use a lighter. There's that. Next up is our diodes. Now, if you're going to try and reuse these diodes, you want to be a bit careful with them. I'm not going to try and reuse them because I've got loads of them. So I am just going to manhandle them out. And I don't even know whether I'm going to put this style in there again, to be perfectly honest. I may well go for something a bit more high powered, or I don't know. I think with the middle position being open with no clipping diodes, I think I don't really need something high powered because we've already got the kind of, you know, actually you only need 2 holes here because we're running 1 wire from each of these to our switch. So really I could just snip them off rather than trying to pull them out, and then run our wires from the 2 front holes here. No problem. Now this time the wires are going to come from the top of the board because our switch is on the top of the board. Where are we going from? We're going to go from these 2 here, and it's just going to go straight up to our switch, but I'll give it a healthy bit of a length of wire. I've got loads of this stuff, and it's not that expensive actually. If you check out the link in my affiliates links, you'll see that they're rather cheap. Oh, actually I've done that completely wrong. Look at that. So I was just about to take one wire from here and 1 wire from here. They would have both been connected together. I actually need to take 1 from this end and 1 from that end. So that would have been a massive mistake. Well done, Joe. I'm glad I spotted that. Otherwise the clipping diodes would have done absolutely nothing, and I'd have been chasing my tail thinking the switch was faulty or whatever. That would not have been fun. But it also means that now, like an absolute tool, I've left a bit of wire inside there, so I'm going to have to try and push it out the other side using the wire that I'm going to fit, which is not the best way of doing it, let me tell you. Especially as this is stranded wire, so it's just matted itself up. Perfect. Brilliant. Well done, Joe. Right, let's take 2. I'd love to say that I'm going to edit that bit out so I don't look like a knob, but I'm not. Right, this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten this wire out so it's like, well, flat, and then I'm going to snip half of the actual strands out, so then a wire's thinner. Now I've done this in the past and people have said, oh, you're changing the capacitance of the wire or whatever. Well, actually it doesn't really matter. Look at your component legs they're using. Some of these small resistors, tiny legs. That capacitor's got massive legs. It's really not going to make a difference in this. I have, of course, used plenty of systems on board where capacitance is like the difference between landing a shell on someone or on a friendly, so you can't change it, or knowing whether there's a fire in a certain component or not, a certain compartment, sorry, or not. So you really can't mess about. But in a pedal, come on now, let's be serious. Does it really make that much difference? I am going to say no. Right, let's tin this one. Maybe it would make a difference in something like pickups, I wonder. Next time I speak to Stu from Sunbear Pickups, I'm going to actually ask him. He'll know the answer to that one, definitely. Right, so there's our 2 wires for that. Now, our switch is literally going to be sat here, maybe that side. So it's not going very far. So to hold them 2 together, I'm just going to get a tiny bit of heat shrink and just wrap them around. That'll just remind me when I'm wiring it all in, once it's all in the enclosure, and I'm just looking at a massive black wires. At least I know that these 2 are going to the same switch. Oh, I've run out of gas in my lighter. Perfect. Maybe that's why you should be using the heat gun, eh, Joe? Done. Perfect. So that is all of the mods that I've stated so far that I was going to do. Next up is going to be... oh, well, I'll tell you what. Do I wire the diodes in now? No, next up, I'm going to go through what we're going to do for our super secret, amazing mod. And I want to know, after this, did anyone guess it right in the comments? So if you've commented on the video saying what you think the mod's going to be and you got it right, please rewrite on your comment and let me know you got it right, and I'll take your word for it. Now it's time for our super secret mod. Not that much of a secret and not that super. Come on, Joe. Right, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take Q1 out, our first transistor, which is the input transistor. It's where all the character of the gain starts. We're going to take that out and we're going to put it on a switch. And we're going to change it between either this transistor, I'm going to try and save this one and use it again, so you can have the normal operation, or I haven't quite decided. I'm going to measure this transistor and I'm going to choose whichever one of these three is most different. So we have a BC183LB, very nice, woo, fuzz face stereo there. We have a CDIL, which also make the some transistors for the MOD, or they did in the past. BC108C, woohoo, that's nice. Or an even nicer, and I'm really hoping I get to use this one, a BC109. I think they're going to be higher gain. I haven't used one for a very long time, but this one's made by RS Components. Happy with that. So I hope it's that one, but we'll see. What we're going to do next is I will go and remove Q1. I will, obviously, if you look at the PCB, we can see that the shape of the transistor is drawn on there. So I'll be able to measure this and get the pin out, so I know which way round the transistor is going to go. But we'll be able to measure this transistor, see what its forward voltage is, its HFE, its forward voltage, what am I talking about? See what its gain is. I'm still talking about transistors in my head. Still talking about diodes in my head there. So we're going to see what its gain is, its HFE, and then we'll go on from there and we'll choose whichever one of these is going to be the most different. So just took a step back from this, went for a cup of coffee and had a little think. Now, looking at the Fox Tone Machine circuit, Q1 is much more like a buffer, or like a boost that boosts into Q2. So with that in mind, my thinking is that Q2 will make more difference to the tone or to the distortion character, because I think that's where most of the distortion is created. So I have indeed removed Q2 and I'll be switching that one, not Q1. Interesting fact. I mean, you could change all of these for whatever you like. It's completely up to you. Bearing in mind that it will change the character of the pedal. I have changed it for 3 different colour wires, and that's because when we get our pin out, there's no way I can mess this up now, because the 3 different colour wires, I'll write down which each one of these is supposed to be, and then that way I can't mess it up. If you're building fuzz pedals or gain pedals in general, or just pedals in general, you're going to want one of these. It is a Peak Atlas DCA 55, and it's what I use to test all of my transistors. And hopefully this transistor is still good, so we can get a pin out. I mean, I could Google or use ChatGPT or something like that to get the pin out. But you know what? You just never know. I like to be able to see it in front of me, you know. It's like a physical, there you go. You've tested that exact transistor that come out of that exact spot, and we know which way it's going. So we can see it's an NPN silicon. Yes, we know. It gives us our pin out. So red is the collector in the middle. That's a nightmare. It means that we have to cross over some legs on our other transistors. Whatever. Green is the emitter and blue is the base. Fine. What we want is our current gain. 278. So that's kind of average for a silicon NPN transistor. I'm going to guess that our BC183 is going to be probably around there, or maybe a bit less. I don't know. As I say, I haven't used any of these for some time now, so I can't actually remember. I think maybe the BC108 and 109 are going to be more than that, but we'll see. So it's an NPN silicon. Our pinouts, the collector is in the middle, so if we use this one, we won't have to mess with the pinouts. It'll just fit in. That'd be nice. And the gain is 310, so 310 HFE. So that's different. It's not that different, but it's different. Now our BC108 we'll test next. Go in number order, shall we? What would you do? Would you try and add something germanium? Or what are you going to do? If you're modding your pedal, what transistors are you going to add in for your mod? It'd be interesting to see. Right, so this one is 514. So there's a hell of a lot more gain in our BC108. And I'm definitely going to choose that over the 183. I'll save that 183LB for the fuzz face. It's a great fuzz face transistor there. That's what I bought them for. Let's try the BC109. Part of me wants to just use this because it's an RS Components one, and I really like the look of it. And I don't think I've actually used the BC109 ever. And this one is 285, so I won't be using that. I'm going to be using the BC108. So now, to get our pinouts right, first things first, I'm just going to solder in. I'll tell you what else. I find it really easy just to put my switch through the actual enclosure when I'm working on it. Probably through there, because then you can get to it, you know. This is going to be a stretch for this one to reach all of these legs, so I may have to extend the legs on it just because they were so short. But what I'll do is I'll take the legs and I'll just bend them outboard, and then we can run maybe a component leg from the edges there. Now let's think about this. The little line in our thread, I want to be pointing up, so that way round. So that means that down is going to be our normal transistor, and up is going to be our higher gain one. That's what we want. So that means that if I push that switch down, it engages this side of the switch. So I'm going to have to fit our transistor to this side. Doesn't matter which way round I put it. I'm going to have to monkey around with the pinouts of the other one anyway. So I'm just going to tack solder. I know that's not a real thing. It's like a tack weld only with solder. This middle leg on there. There. Now while that's in place, what I do want to say is I want this to go straight up and down. I don't want it hanging over the edge because there isn't enough room inside our pedal to have that happening. But what I will do then is I'll just take a sturdy leg from something I've used before, poke it through the holes, and then just point it upwards. We can solder that in. And then all we have to do is manipulate it around with our Nipex snips, so then it touches the leg on our transistor, and we can just solder that in place too. Saves trying to do some gymnastics with the small transistor leg, trying to like get real close to the tag on the switch, solder it in. You know, you'd end up burning the transistor or ruining it. And now that we've got one leg in, we can actually go to the middle leg and just resolder that and give it a proper joint. That'll do. Oh, it's a bit messy, but whatever. Let's tidy it up. I can't leave it. Well done, Joe. Still a bit much more solder on there than I'd like, but what am I going to do? So then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our last leg, which really could probably meet this this tag if I squeezed, but I don't want to put it under any undue stress for literally no reason really. Solder that on there, and then solder it into the tag. And then all we have to do is clip off the excess. I'm actually going to fix that joint there. I can't leave it there. Now with our switch in that position, we are actually engaging this transistor. So if we put our tester onto these three center pins, with the switch in this position, we should be testing this transistor, he says. Right, so NPN silicon, and we get a, I've gone past the pin out, brilliant. Red is the collector, which is the center. Okay, so let's just let's draw this out. Have I got a pen? Not really is the answer to that. Not really. Right, so got our silver pen, that'll do. So if we look at our transistor, it's facing that way. Can you see that? I can see it, that's the main thing. It's facing that way. So we've got our collector is the red one, which is in the middle, collector. Our blue is the base, which is on the right hand side. And then our green, which is on the left hand side, is our emitter. So it's emitter, collector, base. Now if we go over and have a look at our let's do this without pulling any wires out. If we have a look at this drawing on here, if we sit orientated that way round, it's the same way round as our transistor now. So we can say that the emitter is going to be our blue wire, the collector is going to be our black wire, and the base is going to be our red wire, because these two should marry up exactly like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw another drawing here to show which way round our wires are going to go. So it's going to be blue, Joe age 5, black, oh that's terrible, both beginning with B, well done Joe, BL for black, and then red for red. That way I know that the base is going to be the red wire, the collector is going to be the black wire, and the blue wire is going to be the base. No, emitter. Ha! Ah, I was thinking of 7 different things at once there. So now comes the important bit. So we know that we've got our emitter collector base with this. We have to test our BC108 to get our pin out for that. We're going to have to cross 2 pins over. Fine. I've made peace with that. Before I turn the transistor tester on, because it's running out of battery, so I don't want to spend too long looking at it, and I haven't got a battery. Brilliant, well done Joe. I'm just going to take a little bit of wire from our, or sheathing off our wire, and that's going to go over one of the legs when we cross over the legs, just so then they don't short out. So if we turn it on, it's telling us we've got a low battery, thank you very much. Who knows, maybe with all the Amazon affiliates that I make this this episode, I'll buy myself a battery. Look at that. Right, so red is the base, green is the collector, and blue is the emitter. I think that the emitter is going to be the one that isn't crossed over. So if I line that up, so then that's on the same side as the emitter, which I know is the left-hand side because of my drawing. Blue, emitter, left-hand side, good. The red is the base, and I know the red needs to be on the right-hand side. And the green is the collector, and I know the collector needs to be in the middle. So these 2 pins here need to swap around for our transistor to be in the right way round. So if I just bend them round, so then the center pin comes round the bottom and the outside edge pin comes in there. And now all I have to do is take our little sheathing and put it over our center pin, which is our collector. There we are. I know that the pin out is 100% right there. So all I have to do is slide them in. I know the emitter is the one that isn't crossed over, and that's the one on the left-hand side. I can see the emitters on the left-hand side. Great. I know that the collector's in the center, and the collector has been bent over and is in the center. Just double check these things, because if you put this in the wrong way, you know, it's no good. So I can solder all of them in. So now when I run my wires to this switch and the blue attaches here, the black goes in the middle and the red goes here, I know that when I switch this, the pin outs are going to be the same. Fantastic. So now it's time to get everything back in the enclosure, and then we can run our final wires. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I'm telling a lie. Look at that. Because we still have this switch to sort out. Now this switch is our diode switch. So our diodes are here. This is the 2 diode wires. They're just going to run to the 2 center tags here. It doesn't matter which way around they go because it's symmetrical clipping, which means it's the same on both sides. I'm just going to put that to one side so I don't forget it. Now, I'm going to go and get myself a set of 4148 diodes for one side and maybe something germanium for the other side. Got our 4148s for one side, and we've got my last 2 Russian, or Soviet actually, not Russian, Soviet era germanium diodes. Sad to see these go, but they're the last ones, so we might as well use them. Now, I'm just going to clean the legs on these ones. Handily enough, these have got actually markings on them to tell us which way round they go, which is great, because otherwise we'd be flailing in the dark trying to figure this bad boy out. So if we look at our diodes here, we can see that there is a picture of a diode. That's the actual symbol of a diode on a drawing. And same again on this one. All we have to do is match them so then they are facing in opposite directions, i.e. the little triangle on the top, can you see that? Is facing in different directions. I'll put a picture on a screen of it anyway. And they are facing in different directions. Perfect. That means that we can join them together. And all I'm going to do is just wrap one round the other. For now, that'll do. Like so. And then if we solder them in place, I mean, these are going to stick out quite a fair bit. I might have to do some manipulation to get them to miss all the other components that are inside. Oh, why won't that solder? Made the right hash of that bad boy, didn't I? Because I'm too busy trying to talk. Hold on. Yeah, to get them to miss all the components on the inside of the pedal, because that's going to sit here. And of course, they're going to stick out. So I want them to stick, really, I want them to be at the bottom so that then they avoid everything else. So with the little line pointing upwards on this pedal, I want them to be at the top. So I'll put these in this top bit here. I'm just going to poke them through and solder one end in. If you're not confident that you can't drip solder on your work, by the way, it's probably best not to do this on top of your pedal, but I'm a little bit cocky and I've been doing this for some time, so I pretty much know I'm not going to drip solder on there. And then I'm going to put my leg cutting through the hole. If I can ever get it in there. And then I'm just going to solder that in. Wouldn't it be funny if I dropped solder on the top of the pedal now? Right, so there we are. And now all I have to do is join them two together to make the circuit. Now for our normal diodes, all we do is the black lines need to be facing in opposite directions. So then we know that we're clipping each half of our signal. If you're wondering about this, I've done this loads of times, gone through that. All you need to do is the helicopter method, which I've also done loads of times in my other videos. I won't go through that now. And just give it one or two twists. That'll do. And then give them a solder. Again, diodes really don't like that much heat. But you do need to get a good solder joint, so don't be scared, but don't hold it on forever. It's a feel thing, I always say it. It's a feel thing, and you kind of get used to how much heat you can put in things. And you also get faster at working the more you do it, so the best thing you can do is pick up a soldering iron and start going now. Now I'm just going to bend them in on themselves and give them a snip. And I should be able to put them through like so. Don't worry, we're not going to leave them in this position. I'm just going to solder them in and then I'll manipulate them. There, and that'll sit that way round in the pedal. That might actually foul the top. I may have to adjust that, but we'll see. Next, I'm going to get this back in the enclosure and we'll crack on. Right, everything in place now. We've got all of our controls in. I did go with the big metal washers that I always use. We've got our transistor switch and our three-way clipping switch in place, ready to go. I'm going to save the transistor switch wire until last, just because that's the most scary. And we'll go ahead and fit these two. Oh, I've also fitted our tropical fish cap with a bit of double-sided sticky foam and some steel reinforced epoxy. So we'll do that one first. And it's literally going to be a case of running a wire around like this, attaching one to this end and one to the other end. Quite simple. I'm going to go ahead and attach them now. Personally, I think the Joyo pedals are great for the money. They're fantastic. They're a great base to mod off, and they do use some pretty decent components considering the price. Are there any other brands that you think I should be using as a base for my mods? Is there any pedals that you'd like to see on the show? Please let me know and I'll be happy to carry it out. Soon we've got a Boss SD9 coming from my friend Dan. I cannot wait to get stuck into that. Thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. I can't believe we're at 7,000 subscribers. 7,000! Wow, I didn't think there was that many pedal geeks in the world. So, thank you. Our tropical fish cap is now in place, good to go. Doesn't matter which way round you add them wires because it's non-polar. Same with our diodes. We're going to take these two wires here, if I can get them. Oh, look at that, how confusing. The black wire from our transistor is like literally flying over them. So these two wires here, doesn't matter which side we go to because it's symmetrical clipping. So I'm going to go ahead and just get them in now. Now for the fun bit, the bit that I'm most likely to mess up. We can see that if we have our transistor this way round, with the flat side facing towards us, we have our emitter, collector, base. You can see that? Emitter, collector, base. Well, that means that the blue goes to the emitter, which is the left-hand side, the black to the centre, which is the collector, and the red to the base on the right-hand side. So first of all, blue. I'll just take my blue wire, which is here. I'm going to run it round the front. Oh, am I going to run it round the front or over the top and drop it in? I'm going to go over the top and drop. Oh, choices. So it could go round the front and drop it in or over the top. In fact, I'm going to go the opposite way round because this wire is going to overlap all of them tags where I'm going to want to solder into. So that was a bit silly. We're going to go with the red wire going into the base, which is the right-hand side. So this is our first one. And remembering that there's 4 poles here, so don't go to the far right one because that's not connected to anything. I mean, we could have added an LED to say which way round this thing was set up in, but I think for this one that was just one too far. It's meant to be a beginner mod for the cheap fuzz pedal, so I don't want to go too much into it. I was trying to avoid doing much drilling in this one because I think that's the one thing in mods that puts beginners off is actually drilling their pedal. I don't know why, but I suppose if you're not used to drilling them. Right, so now back to our drawing board, we can see that black goes in the centre and that connects to the collector. There's our black wire. Let's move our transistor out the way a little bit if we can. I don't want to bend it too much in case I break it. Again, that would be pretty devastating at this point. I'm really hoping this is the last little bit and it's just going to work first time. No pedal ever works bloody first time, so we'll see. And then lastly, I know it's the only wire left and the only tag left, but we'll still check it. It is the blue wire on the left going to the emitter. As they say, check twice, cut once and all of that. Right, that should, he says, be us. One thing I do want to check is that we're not going to foul the enclosure when I put this in. I don't think we are. Yeah, I think we're below it. Maybe they're not, but we can bend them down. Yeah, I think we're good. We'll test the pedal with it off and then we can always put that back on and test the pedal afterwards. That's everything soldered up and this Franken Fuzz is ready to go. Let's plug it in and hear how it sounds. But before we get there, I'd like to just say thank you to everyone who's watched the video so far. It means the world to me. I love making these videos. And if you could, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help my channel grow. Thank you. Okay, so you're going to hear the modified Joyo Voodoo Octave against the original Joyo Voodoo Octave. They are both true bypass, so it doesn't matter that they're in line with each other. Only one will be on at any given time. For the modified version, we've got the original transistor set up at the minute, and we've also got the original diode set up. For the purpose of this test, I'm going to leave everything set out between 1 and 2 o'clock. It'll all be done with my Melody Maker, mainly because it's my favourite guitar, and why not? So, here's my clean tone. Now, the original version in the mid-cut setting. Now the modified version. Now we're going to go through to the normal setting. Does it clean up? Don't know. Not really, but a little bit better. Mid-cut setting, and now I'm gonna, in fact, we'll do mid-cut setting on both. We'll do the normal version first, mid-cut setting, and then we'll engage the octave up. I mean, there's a marked difference there, isn't there? I mean, I know it's deeper sounding, and that's because we put that 4.7 NF cap in there. But what else we got? Let's see what it sounds like when we start messing about with the clipping section and with the transistor selection. So this is with the BC108. What happens if we turn the fuzz all the way up, give it some volume? Let's turn everything on full for both of them. And neck pickup. I actually prefer that. Wonder if we change the diode, the transistor back over, if it'll seem. Yeah, with the original transistor it sounds better. Actually prefer that sound there. Then when you start banging the tone up, much prefer this one. Oh, okay, background noise there. Background noise there. There's a marked difference in the noise as well, which makes it much more usable. Overall, I'm really happy with the mod. I'd love to know what you think of my modified version against the normal version. And remember, this one is going to be available at hellocellulareffects.com. And that's how I got hooked on these pedals. Awesome mods, awesome pedals, awesome tones. If you like this video so far and you got value from it, you're going to love this video where I show my ultimate mods for Boss pedals.